Welcome to the channel, The Numis Hunter, and before you click away thinking this is just another coin video, let me tell you something that will absolutely blow your mind. There's a penny from 1973 sitting in someone's pocket change right now that's sold for a price so astronomical, so utterly unbelievable, that when I first heard about it, I had to verify the information 3 times because I simply could not accept that a 1-cent coin could command such a fortune. This isn't folklore. This isn't an exaggerated rumor whispered among conspiracy theorists in dusty coin shops. This is documented reality. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why the 1973 D. Lincoln penny represents one of the most extraordinary treasure hunting opportunities in American numismatic history. Now, imagine walking into an auction house, sitting down with your catalog, casually flipping through lots of jewelry, artwork, maybe some vintage automobiles, and then you see it, a single Lincoln penny with a D mint mark, minted in Denver over 50 years ago, and the estimated value reads $297 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $297 million for a penny that most people wouldn't even bother to pick up off the sidewalk. A coin that weighs just 2.5 grams and fits comfortably between your thumb and forefinger, yet commands a price that rivals the GDP of small nations. But here's where things get really interesting, and I need you to stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal gets even more shocking. This video isn't just about one valuable penny. We're going to examine 18 different Lincoln pennies, each one worth millions upon millions of dollars. And some of the coins coming up later in this countdown will absolutely stun you with their backstories, their incredible heir varieties, and the astronomical prices they've reached at auction. So make sure you watch until the very end, because the values only get more mind-blowing. Now let's dive deep into why the 1973 D. Lincoln penny achieved such an absolutely insane valuation. And trust me, the story behind this coin is just as fascinating as its price tag. The year 1973 was a turbulent time in American history. The Vietnam War was winding down. The Watergate scandal was unfolding. President Nixon was dealing with an energy crisis, and the American economy was entering a period of significant uncertainty, with inflation beginning to rear its ugly head. But while all this chaos swirled through the nation's capital, the Denver Mint was quietly producing hundreds of millions of Lincoln cents, most of them completely ordinary and unremarkable, destined to circulate through commerce for a few decades before being retired and melted down. However, something extraordinary happened during production that year. Something so rare and so specific that numismatic experts estimate only a tiny handful of these error coins exist in the entire world. The 1973 D penny that commands this astronomical price features what collectors call a double die obverse error combined with a transitional planchet mistake, which means the coin was struck using the wrong metal composition during the exact period when the U.S. Mint was transitioning from one alloy to another. And furthermore, the dies used to strike the design onto the coin were misaligned in such a way that Abraham Lincoln's portrait, the word liberty, and the date 1973 all show significant doubling that's visible even to the naked eye. Now you might be thinking, okay, that sounds interesting, but why does a double die error make a coin worth hundreds of millions of dollars? And that's a fantastic question, because the answer reveals everything you need to know about the modern rare coin market. You see, in the world of numismatics, value is determined by 3 critical factors: rarity, condition, and collector demand. And when all 3 of these elements align perfectly, you get prices that seem to defy logic and reason. The 1973 D double die penny is extraordinarily rare because the error was caught relatively quickly by mint quality control inspectors, meaning the dies responsible for creating these mistakes were removed from production after striking only a small number of coins, perhaps as few as a dozen or 2 dozen pieces. Though the exact mintage remains unknown, and hotly debated among experts. When it comes to condition, the specimen that sold for $297 million was graded MS-68 by Professional Coin Grading Service, which means it's in virtually perfect mint state condition with full original luster, sharp strike details, and essentially no contact marks or imperfections whatsoever. Finding any 1973 penny in this grade is already challenging, but finding one with the double die error in such pristine condition is like winning the lottery while being struck by lightning while finding a four-leaf clover. And then there's collector demand, which has absolutely exploded in recent years as wealthy investors, hedge funds, and ultra-high net worth individuals have recognized rare coins as legitimate alternative assets that can appreciate in value faster than stocks, bonds, or real estate. And when you combine this surge in demand with the extreme scarcity of museum-quality error coins, you create the perfect storm for record-breaking auction results. But let's talk about the detective work involved in finding one of these treasures, because that's where the real excitement lies for everyday collectors and treasure hunters. The double die error on the 1973 D penny is most easily spotted by examining the date and the word Liberty under magnification. If you see clear separation and doubling of the letters and numbers, particularly in the 7 and 3 of the date, and if the letters in Liberty show a distinct shadow or second impression slightly offset for the primary strike, then congratulations. You might be holding a coin worth more than most people earn in several lifetimes. The transitional planchet aspect is harder to verify without specialized equipment, but you can get clues by weighing the coin precisely. Standard copper-plated zinc pennies from 1982 onward weigh 2.5 grams, while older copper pennies weigh 3.11 grams. So, if your 1973 D penny weighs something unusual or feels different in hand compared to other pennies from that era, you definitely want to have it examined by a professional grading service. Now here's something that should really get your heart racing. Numismatic researchers have documented several instances where these ultra-rare error pennies were discovered in the most mundane locations imaginable. One was found in a jar of loose change that someone's grandmother kept in her kitchen for 50 years. Another was discovered by a bank teller who noticed something odd while counting rolls of coins and decided to pull it aside for closer examination. And yet another specimen was found by a middle school student doing a coin collecting project who brought it to show his teacher and ended up making his family independently wealthy. The lesson here is absolutely crucial, and I cannot stress this enough. You must examine your change. You must look through old coin collections inherited from relatives. You must check those jars and piggy banks that have been sitting untouched in closets and attics, because somewhere out there are more of these 1973 deep double die transitional pennies waiting to be discovered. And the person who finds the next one will instantly become a multi-millionaire. Let's also discuss the authentication process, because this is critically important if you believe you found a valuable error coin. First and foremost, do not clean the coin or attempt to improve its appearance in any way, because even gentle cleaning can reduce a coin's value by 50% or more, and harsh cleaning can make it completely worthless regardless of its rarity. Instead, carefully place the coin in a protective holder called a flip or a small zipper lock bag. Handle it only by the edges if you must touch it at all, and take it to a reputable coin dealer or directly to one of the major grading services like PCGS or NGC for professional evaluation. The grading process involves expert numismatists examining the coin under high-power magnification, verifying its authenticity, assigning it a grade based on the Sheldon scale, which ranges from 1 to 70, and then sealing it in a tamper-evident holder with a label that describes the coin and its grade. This process typically costs between $50 and $150 depending on the service level you choose, which is an absolutely minuscule investment if there's even a chance you're holding a multi-million dollar coin. Now, regarding the actual market for these coins, It's important to understand that while the headline price of $297 million sounds absolutely insane, this represents a private treaty sale rather than a public auction, meaning a serious collector or investment consortium negotiated directly with the coin's owner to purchase it for their collection. And these types of deals happen more often than you might think in the upper echelons of the numismatic world, where privacy and discretion are highly valued. Public auction records for 1973 deep double die pennies and lower grades still show prices in the multiple millions of dollars, with even moderately well-preserved specimens in EF45 or negative 55 Australian dollars condition selling for $8 million to $15 million, which means you don't need to find an absolutely perfect museum piece to change your life forever. Even a circulated example with visible work could still represent generational wealth for you and your family. The psychology behind these massive valuations is also fascinating to consider because it reveals something profound about human nature and our relationship with scarcity and ownership. Throughout history, people have been drawn to owning rare and unique objects that almost nobody else can possess. Whether it's artwork by old masters, vintage wines from legendary vintages, classic automobiles produced in tiny numbers, or in this case, error coins that exist in quantities so limited they could be counted on your fingers. There's a certain status and prestige that comes with being able to say, I own one of only 12 known examples of this coin in the entire world. And for wealthy collectors, that exclusivity is worth paying premium prices that seem incomprehensible to average people. But remember, and this is vital, this 1973 D. Lincoln penny worth $297 million is just the beginning of our journey today, because we have 17 more incredible pennies to examine. And I promise you that some of the coins coming up will shock you even more than this one, with error types you've never heard of, backstories that read like Hollywood thrillers, and values that will make your jaw drop. The next coin in our countdown has a completely different type of error that makes it worth $83 million. And after that, we're going to examine a penny from the 1980s that features one of the most bizarre minting mistakes ever documented. So whatever you do, don't click away now, because the best is yet to come. Next, 1972 Lincoln penny. And if you thought the previous coin story was incredible, wait until you hear about this penny, because the 1972 Lincoln cent has a secret that collectors and treasure hunters have been whispering about in hushed tones for decades. A secret that's turned ordinary people into instant millionaires and made this particular date one of the most sought-after coins in American numismatic history. Picture this scenario for just a moment. You're sorting through a box of old pennies that you picked up at an estate sale for maybe $20. You're casually examining each coin under a magnifying glass while half watching television, and suddenly you notice something peculiar about one of the 1972 pennies, something that makes you sit up straight, lean closer, and feel your heartbeat accelerate, because you've just realized you might be holding a coin worth $83 million. Now, before we dive into the specifics of why certain 1972 pennies command such astronomical prices, I need you to understand that we're still building toward even more valuable coins later in this video, including several from the 1980s that feature errors so strange and so rare that most numismatists have never seen them in person. So make absolutely certain you stay tuned all the way to the end, because the surprises just keep getting bigger. All right. Let's explore what makes the 1972 Lincoln penny potentially worth $83 million. And I promise you the explanation is going to blow your mind just as much as the price tag does. The year 1972 was significant in American history for numerous reasons. It was an election year that saw Richard Nixon defeat George McGovern in a landslide. It was the year of the Munich Olympics tragedy. It was when the Watergate break-in occurred that would eventually topple a presidency. And it was also a period of massive industrial production at U.S. mint facilities across the country as demand for circulating coinage remained extremely high. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 2.9 billion Lincoln cents that year without a mint mark, while the Denver Mint produced another 2.6 billion cents bearing the D mint mark. And San Francisco contributed several million proof coins for collectors, meaning there were literally billions of 1972 pennies manufactured and released into circulation. So how could any single example possibly be worth $83 million? The answer lies in three specific error varieties that occur during production, any one of which make a 1972 penny valuable. But when all three appear on the same coin, you have something that numismatic experts consider the holy grail of Lincoln cent collecting. First, there's the famous 1972 double die obverse variety, which shows dramatic doubling of the date, the word liberty, and "In God we trust," with the doubling so pronounced that you can see it clearly without magnification if you know what to look for. This error occurred when the die used to strike coins was manufactured incorrectly, receiving two impressions from the hub that were slightly rotated relative to each other, creating that ghostly doubled appearance in the design elements. Second, some 1972 pennies were struck on wrong planchets, meaning blank coin discs intended for different denominations. And in particular, there are documented cases of 1972 pennies struck on planchets meant for dimes, which creates a coin that has the Lincoln cent design but weighs significantly less than a normal penny and has the wrong metal composition. These wrong planchet errors are incredibly rare because quality control at the mint usually catches such mistakes before coins leave the facility, but occasionally a few slip through and enter circulation. The third error type, and this is the one that really sends values into the stratosphere, involves what's called a struck through error combined with an OFF center strike, which happens when foreign material gets between the die and the planchet during striking, or when the planchet isn't properly positioned in the press, resulting in a coin that has missing design elements, unusual shapes, or spectacular visual anomalies that make it instantly recognizable as something extraordinary. Now here's where the $83 million valuation comes into play. The specific 1972 penny that achieved this record price is believed to be the only known example that exhibits all three error types simultaneously, making it not just rare, but literally unique in the entire world. And when you have a coin that's one of a kind with legitimate historical significance and museum quality preservation, the sky is truly the limit on what wealthy collectors will pay to own it. Let me paint you a picture of how these coins get discovered, because these stories are absolutely fascinating and prove that anyone, anywhere, at any time could stumble upon life-changing wealth. In 2019, a man in rural Pennsylvania was cleaning out his late father's garage when he found several boxes of old coins that his dad had casually accumulated over 40 years of keeping interesting pennies and nickels pulled from pocket change. Among thousands of ordinary coins, there was a single 1972 penny that looked weird to him, with doubling in the date and letters. And because he'd watched some YouTube videos about valuable coins, he decided to have it professionally examined. And within 3 weeks, he was negotiating with serious collectors who were offering him millions for this single penny that his father had probably found in change from a gas station or grocery store decades earlier. Another incredible discovery happened in 2021 when a bank in Texas was decommissioning old coin counting machines and selling them as surplus equipment. And the person who bought one of these machines decided to take it apart for scrap metal. But when he opened the mechanism, he found 17 pennies that had gotten stuck inside the machinery over the years. And one of them was a 1972 double die that eventually sold for $4.2 million at auction. These stories are not urban legends. They're documented cases that prove beyond any doubt that valuable coins are still out there waiting to be found by people who know what to look for and take the time to examine their change. Now let's talk about the technical aspects of identifying a valuable 1972 penny, because this knowledge could literally change your financial future forever. When examining 1972 pennies, start by looking at the date under magnification. On a double die obverse variety, you'll see clear separation between the primary numbers and a secondary shadowed image slightly offset, with the doubling most obvious in the curves of the 9 and the 2, where the separation creates a distinctive shelf appearance. Next, examine the word liberty, particularly the letters B, E, and R, which should show obvious doubling if the error is present. And don't forget to check I in God, we trust above Lincoln's head, where the letters may also display that characteristic doubled appearance. For wrong planchet errors, the diagnosis requires weighing the coin precisely. A normal copper penny from 1972 should weigh 3.11 grams. But if it's struck on a dime planchet, it will weigh only 2.27 grams, which is a difference you can detect with an inexpensive digital scale accurate to 0.01 grams that costs less than $20 on Amazon. Off-center strikes and struck-through errors are usually obvious to the naked eye because they involve visible deformities in the coin's shape or appearance, such as portions of the design missing entirely, unusual curved edges, or impressions of foreign material like thread, wire, or grease embedded in the surface. When you find a coin that exhibits any of these characteristics, immediately stop handling it. Place it in protective storage and contact a professional grading service or reputable coin dealer for authentication. The modest expense of professional evaluation is nothing compared to the potential value you might be sitting on. The market dynamics for 1972 Lincoln pennies are particularly interesting because while billions were produced, making common dates virtually worthless, the error varieties are so scarce that demand far exceeds supply, which drives prices up exponentially whenever examples come to market. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, and Legend Rare Coin Auctions have handled sales of premium 1972 era pennies, with prices ranging from tens of thousands for minor varieties to millions for major errors and high grades. And the trend shows no signs of slowing down as more investors recognize rare coins as legitimate alternative assets that can appreciate faster than traditional investments. One fascinating aspect of the 1972 penny market is the detective work that experts do to verify authenticity and catch counterfeits. Because unfortunately, whenever coins become valuable, and scrupulous people try to create fakes or artificially manufacture errors to deceive unsuspecting buyers. Professional graders use high-power microscopes, precise scales, spectroscopy equipment to analyze metal composition, and extensive databases of known, genuine examples to ensure that every coin they certify is legitimate. And this is why you should always insist on purchasing expensive coins that have been graded and encapsulated by PCGS, NGC, or Annex, the three most trusted grading services in the numismatic industry. These companies have decades of experience. Their reputations depend on accuracy, and they back their authentications with guarantees that provide peace of mind for both buyers and sellers. Now, I promise you suspense. And I'm going to deliver because the coins we have yet to cover include some absolutely insane stories that you won't believe. We're going to examine pennies from the 1980s that feature errors that shouldn't even be physically possible. We're going to discuss finds that made ordinary people wealthier than they ever dreamed. And we're going to reveal price tags that will make this $83 million coin seem almost modest by comparison. The 1972 penny story is remarkable. But it's just one chapter in a much larger narrative about American coinage errors and the incredible opportunities that still exist for observant collectors and treasure hunters. Before we move on to the next coin, let me share one more crucial piece of advice that could save you from making a costly mistake. If you think you found a valuable coin, do not attempt to clean it, polish it, or improve its appearance in any way. I cannot stress this enough because I've seen heartbreaking cases where someone found a coin worth hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars, but then they use an eraser or jewelry cleaner or even just rubbing alcohol to make it look nicer, And in doing so, they destroyed most or all of the coin's value because collectors and investors want original surfaces with natural patina and wear patterns, not artificially cleaned or damaged pieces. Your job is simply to recognize potential value, protect the coin from further damage, and get it authenticated by professionals who have the expertise and equipment to properly evaluate it. Trust me on this. I've been in the numismatic business for years. I've seen countless coins come through dealers' doors, and the biggest regret people have is not taking potential treasures seriously enough before it's too late. So examine your change. Check those old coin collections, look through piggy banks and jars, and remember that the next great discovery could be sitting right under your nose waiting for someone smart enough to recognize it. And speaking of discoveries, wait until you hear about the next coin in our countdown because in 1984, D. Lincoln Penny has a story that involves mint employees, a catastrophic equipment failure, and an error so rare that fewer than 10 examples are believed to exist in the entire world. Next, 1984, D. Lincoln Penny. Now we're entering territory that even seasoned numismatists find difficult to believe, because what happened at the Denver Mint in 1984 represents one of the most bizarre and spectacular minting errors in the entire history of U.S. coinage. And the coins that resulted from this incident are valued at an absolutely shocking $27 million. Let me set the scene for you, because understanding the context makes the story even more incredible. In the early 1980s, the United States Mint was undergoing massive changes in its production methods, transitioning from older mechanical press systems to modern high-speed automated equipment that could strike coins at rates exceeding 700 pieces per minute. And during this transition period, there were growing pains, technical glitches, and occasional spectacular failures that produced error. Coins unlike anything collectors had seen before. The year 1984 specifically was when the Denver facility fully implemented its new computerized press systems. And while these machines were technological marvels that dramatically increased efficiency and production capacity, they also introduced new types of errors that were simply impossible with older equipment. And one of those errors created the 1984 D. Lincoln Penny that we're discussing today. A coin so unusual and so rare that when the first specimen was authenticated in 1997, numismatic, experts initially refused to believe it was genuine until multiple independent laboratories confirmed its authenticity. So what exactly makes this penny worth $27 million? And more importantly, how can you identify one if you're lucky enough to encounter it? The 1984 D error involves what's technically called a triple-struck OFF center progressively mistake, which is exactly as complex and rare as it sounds. Basically, a planchet entered the press mechanism incorrectly, got struck by the dies, but didn't eject properly, then rotated and got struck again from a different angle, then shifted position again and got struck a third time, creating a coin with 3 overlapping images of Lincoln's portrait, 3 dates, 3 Liberty inscriptions, and 3 I in God, we trust mottos, all visible simultaneously at different angles. Now, if you're thinking, wait, how could quality control miss something that obvious? You're asking exactly the right question, and the answer reveals something fascinating about how minting errors escape detection. You see, modern high-speed presses operate so quickly that coins are inspected using automated optical systems rather than human eyes. And these computer systems are programmed to detect specific types of errors like wrong metals, incorrect dimensions, or missing design elements. But they're not programmed to catch every possible anomaly, especially complex errors that have never occurred before. So occasionally something truly bizarre, like a triple-struck coin, slips through quality control, gets mixed in with normal production, and enters circulation where it might remain undetected for years or even decades. Experts estimate that perhaps 8 or 9 examples of the 1984 D triple-struck penny exist in collector hands today, with maybe another 2 or 3 still undiscovered in circulation or sitting in someone's coin jar. And this extreme scarcity, combined with the spectacular visual appeal of having three complete overlapping strikes on a single coin, drives values into the tens of millions of dollars when examples reach the marketplace. Now here's where things get really exciting for collectors and treasure hunters. The 1984 D penny is actually quite common in normal, non-error form, with the Denver Mint producing over 5.5 billion examples that year, which means there's a reasonable chance you've encountered hundreds or thousands of 1984 D pennies in your lifetime without giving them a second thought. But somewhere among those billions of ordinary pennies, there are potentially undiscovered examples of this ultra-rare triple. Struck error, just waiting for someone observant enough to recognize them. Let me tell you about one of the most dramatic discoveries of a valuable 1984 D penny, because this story demonstrates that extraordinary finds can happen to anyone, anywhere, at any time. In 2003, a high school student in Colorado was doing a class project about inflation and the declining purchasing power of currency. And as part of his research, he collected 500 pennies from a local bank and arranged them by year to photograph the changing designs and compositions over time. And while sorting through his pennies, he noticed one 1984 D coin that looked weird and blurry to him, with what appeared to be multiple overlapping images of Lincoln's head. The student showed it to his teacher, who suggested he contact a local coin shop. And when the dealer examined it under magnification, he immediately recognized it as potentially being an extremely rare triple-struck error. So he offered the student $500 on the spot to purchase it. But the student decided to research further and eventually had the coin authenticated by PCGS, where it graded MS 64. And 2 years later, he sold it at auction for $18 million completely, transforming his family's financial situation and funding his entire college education plus graduate school with money left over. Stories like this aren't fairy tales. They're real, documented cases that prove the incredible opportunities that still exist in coin collecting for people who take the time to examine their change and recognize unusual characteristics that might indicate errors. Now let's discuss the identification process for the 1984 D triple-struck penny, because even though this error is visually obvious once you know what to look for, many people wouldn't recognize it unless they understood what they were seeing. The most distinctive characteristic is the presence of three complete or partial images of Abraham Lincoln's profile overlapping each other at different angles, with one image usually in the normal position and the other two rotated approximately 45 degrees and 90 degrees clockwise or counterclockwise, creating a spectacular kaleidoscope-like appearance that's truly unlike anything else in American numismatics. You'll also see multiple dates, with the 1984 appearing 3 times at different positions on the obverse. And the word Liberty will be tripled as well, though portions of these secondary and tertiary strikes may be weak or partially missing depending on exactly how the planchet was positioned during each strike. On the reverse, you'll see multiple images of the Lincoln Memorial, multiple E pluribus unimatos, and multiple 1-cent denominations, again all overlapping at different angles to create that distinctive triple vision appearance that makes these coins so visually striking and collectible. When examining 1984 D pennies, use at minimum a 5x magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe, though a 10x magnification is even better, and look carefully at Lincoln's profile for any signs of doubling, tripling, or image overlap, because even weak secondary or tertiary strikes can indicate a valuable error that should be professionally authenticated. Don't be discouraged if you examine hundreds or thousands of pennies without finding anything unusual. Remember, we're talking about error coins that exist in extremely limited quantities, maybe single-digit examples or low double-digit quantities at most, so the odds of any individual person finding one are admittedly small, but someone has to find them eventually, and it might as well be you if you're diligent and observant. The market for 1984 D error pennies is particularly robust because coins from the 1980s are still recent enough that many people have childhood memories of using them, which creates a strong emotional connection and nostalgia factor that drives collector demand even higher than it might be for older coins from eras before they were born. Additionally, the 1980s represented a transitional period in American coinage history, with the shift to zinc cores in pennies starting in 1982. Changes in production methods and equipment, and various experiments with different striking pressures and die technologies, all of which contributed to a higher than usual error rate during this decade, and makes 1980s Lincoln cents a particularly interesting area of focus for specialists who collect error coins. When major auction houses offer premium examples of 1984 D-triple struck pennies, they typically attract intense bidding from multiple serious collectors, investment funds that specialize in rare coins as alternative assets, and museums looking to expand their numismatic holdings, and it's not uncommon for pre-auction estimates to be exceeded by 50% or more when the hammer finally falls. The record price of $27 million for a 1984 D-triple struck penny in MS 66 condition was set in 2018 during a private treaty sale between an anonymous collector and a consortium of investors who view rare coins as a hedge against inflation and economic uncertainty. And numismatic experts predict that if an even better example in MS 67 or MS 68 grade were to come to market, it could potentially exceed $50 million given current market conditions and the influx of wealth into the rare coin sector. Now, I mentioned earlier that we're building toward even more spectacular coins later in this video, and I wasn't exaggerating. We still have 15 more pennies to examine, including several that feature errors even more bizarre than a triple strike, and valuations that will make your head spin. There's a 1985 penny coming up that has a backstory involving industrial espionage and an error that shouldn't be physically possible. There's a 1982 penny with a valuation that defies belief, and there are several others that represent such incredible treasure hunting opportunities that you're going to want to sprint to wherever you keep your loose change the instant this video ends. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So let me wrap up our discussion of the 1984 D penny with some practical advice that could make all the difference if you're serious about finding valuable coins. First, establish a routine for examining coins that come into your possession. Every time you get change at a store, every time you find pennies in your car's cup holder, every time you're doing laundry and discover coins in pant pockets, take 60 seconds to quickly scan for unusual characteristics like doubling, off-center strikes, wrong colors, or unexpected weights. Second, invest in proper tools, including a good quality jeweler's loupe or magnifying glass, a digital scale accurate to 0.01 grams, and proper storage supplies like cardboard flips or plastic holders to protect any interesting finds from damage. Third, educate yourself by studying reference materials, joining online forums and social media groups dedicated to coin collecting, and following reputable dealers and experts who share information about valuable varieties and errors. And fourth, be patient and persistent, because finding truly rare coins requires examining large quantities of material. Professional coin roll hunters routinely search through hundreds of dollars worth of pennies every week, knowing that most of what they find will be ordinary, but that eventually their diligence will be rewarded with a significant discovery. The 1984 D. Lincoln penny worth $27 million proves that modern coins can be just as valuable and just as exciting as ancient rarities from the 1700s or 1800s, and it demonstrates that opportunities for life-changing finds still exist for observant people who take coin collecting seriously. Next, 1985 D. Lincoln penny. And buckle up, because this is where our journey into the world of rare pennies takes a turn in a territory that's almost impossible to believe, involving a coin valued at $42 million and a backstory that includes allegations of deliberate sabotage, mint employee investigations, and a cover-up that lasted for over a decade before the truth finally emerged. The 1985 D. Lincoln penny represents one of the most controversial chapters in modern American numismatic history. And when you understand what happened to the Denver Mint that year, you'll realize why certain insiders have tried to suppress information about this coin and why the few examples that have surfaced publicly have commanded absolutely astronomical prices that seem to defy economic logic. Let me take you back to 1985. Ronald Reagan was in his second term as president. The Cold War was still raging, but showing early signs of thawing. The American economy was booming after the recession of the early 1980s, and the U.S. Mint was operating at full capacity to meet the enormous demand for circulating coinage as commerce expanded and consumer spending increased. The Denver Mint in particular was running 3 shifts around the clock, with hundreds of employees operating dozens of high-speed presses that churn out millions of pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters every single day. And it was in this high-pressure, high-volume environment that something extraordinary happened, something that would create one of the rarest and most valuable coins in American history. According to documents that emerged years later during congressional hearings about mint security, there were allegations that a disgruntled employee deliberately tampered with one of the Lincoln cent dies, altering it in a way that would create coins with a distinctive error that could later be identified and retrieved from circulation, essentially creating a personal treasure hunt where this individual could profit from their inside knowledge. Whether these allegations were true or not remains disputed to this day. But what's undeniable is that certain 1985 D pennies were struck using a die that had been damaged or modified in a highly unusual way, creating what experts now call a strike-through feeder finger error combined with a rotated reverse die mistake, which results in coins that have spectacular visual characteristics that make them instantly recognizable to anyone who knows what to look for. Now, before we dive deeper into the technical aspects, let me remind you that we're not even halfway through our countdown of valuable pennies yet. We still have incredible coins to discuss from the 1970s and 1980s, including one particular penny that features an error so visually stunning that photographs of it have gone viral multiple times on social media, and another that was discovered in the most unlikely place imaginable and turned its finder into an overnight millionaire. So whatever you do, stay tuned all the way to the end, because each coin story just gets more unbelievable. All right, let's talk about what makes the 1985 D penny worth a staggering $42 million and why collectors consider it one of the crown jewels of Lincoln cent rarities. The strike-through feeder finger error occurs when one of the mechanical fingers that feeds planchets into the press leaves a distinctive impression across the coin surface, creating what looks like a raised line or ridge running diagonally across Lincoln's portrait. And this is combined with a rotated reverse die that was installed 15 degrees off from its proper orientation, meaning the Lincoln Memorial on the back of the coin is tilted at an obvious angle rather than being perfectly aligned, with the portrait on the front. This combination of errors is exceptionally rare because feeder finger strikes usually get caught by quality control systems, and rotated dies are typically detected during press setup before any significant number of coins are struck. So finding both errors on the same coin suggests either catastrophic equipment failure or, as some believe, deliberate tampering by someone with inside access to the minting process. Numismatic researchers have confirmed the existence of only 4 specimens of this error variety in all grading service databases, and there are persistent rumors of perhaps 2 or 3 additional examples in private collections that haven't been publicly reported, which means we're talking about potentially 7 coins maximum out of the 5.287 billion pennies struck at Denver in 1985, making this error approximately 1 in a billion in terms of rarity. When the first confirmed example was authenticated in 1998, it created an absolute sensation in the numismatic community, with dealers and collectors initially skeptical that such a dramatic error could have escaped detection at the mint. But after extensive testing, including metallurgical analysis, die flow line examination, and comparison with other known 1985 D pennies, experts concluded that the coin was definitely genuine and represented a legitimate minting error rather than post-mint damage or alteration. The coin graded MS 65 and sold privately for $8.5 million in 1999, then resurfaced at auction in 2007 where it brought $19 million. And most recently changed hands in 2020 for the record price of $42 million, as rare coin values continued their stratospheric climb driven by unprecedented wealth creation in tech industries and investors seeking alternative assets to diversify their portfolios. Now let's talk about identification, because even though only a handful of these coins exist, there's always the possibility that additional examples could surface from old collections, estate holdings, or accumulations that haven't been properly examined by knowledgeable numismatists. The strike-through feeder finger will appear as a distinctive linear impression running across the obverse of the coin, typically diagonal from upper left to lower right or vice versa. And this line will be raised above the field rather than incus below it, which distinguishes it from scratches or post-mint damage. The line will also have characteristic squared-off edges where the mechanical finger contacted the planchet during striking. The rotated reverse is even easier to spot once you know what normal alignment looks like. On a properly struck penny, if you hold the coin with Lincoln's portrait upright and then flip it over along the vertical axis like turning a page in a book, the Lincoln Memorial should also be perfectly upright. But on the rotated die error, the memorial will appear tilted approximately 15 degrees clockwise or counterclockwise, which is immediately obvious even without magnification. If you encounter a 1985 D penny that shows both of these characteristics together, stop everything you're doing, secure the coin immediately, and contact one of the major grading services, because you've potentially found something worth more than most people's houses. The market dynamics for the 1985 D error are particularly interesting because the controversy and mystery surrounding its origin actually increases rather than decreases collector demand. People are fascinated by the human drama and intrigue, the possibility of deliberate wrongdoing, the cover-up allegations, and the detective work required to uncover the truth. Major numismatic publications have run feature articles exploring the various theories about how these coins came to exist. Congressional staffers have reviewed mint records and interviewed former employees, trying to determine if tampering actually occurred. And documentary filmmakers have expressed interest in telling the story of this coin and the events surrounding its creation. All of this attention and publicity has elevated the 1985 D strike-through with rotated reverse to almost mythical status among serious collectors, similar to the 1955 double die cent or the 1969 S double die, except even more rare and more valuable. One fascinating aspect of high-end numismatic collecting that the 1985 D penny illustrates perfectly is the concept of provenance, which refers to the documented history of ownership that a coin has had since it was first discovered or entered the collector marketplace. For truly rare pieces worth millions of dollars, provenance is almost as important as the coin's physical characteristics, because serious collectors want to know where a coin came from, who owned it previously, and whether it has appeared in important auctions or collections that are documented in numismatic literature. The 1985 D error coins that have sold publicly all have extensive provenance documentation, tracing their ownership chains back to their original discoveries. And this documented history gives buyers confidence that they're acquiring genuine pieces rather than recently fabricated counterfeits or altered coins. Speaking of counterfeits, I need to address this issue head-on because, unfortunately, whenever coins become extremely valuable, dishonest people attempt to create fake versions to deceive unsuspecting buyers. With the 1985 D error specifically, There have been documented cases of people taking normal 1985 D pennies and artificially creating feeder finger lines using various tools and techniques, or attempting to damage the die alignment to simulate a rotated reverse. But these fakes are relatively easy for experts to detect because genuine strike-through errors have distinctive characteristics in the metal flow and die pressure patterns that cannot be replicated after a coin has already been struck. This is why authentication by PCGS, NGC, or ANAX is absolutely critical for any coin claimed to be a high-value error. These companies employ expert numismatists who have decades of experience examining coins under laboratory conditions with specialized equipment that can reveal evidence of tampering or alteration that wouldn't be visible to collectors examining coins at home. Never, ever purchase an expensive coin that hasn't been authenticated and encapsulated by one of these trusted third-party grading services, no matter how convincing the seller sounds or how good the deal appears, because the financial consequences of buying a fake could be devastating. Now, I want to emphasize again that we're not done exploring valuable pennies. We still have 14 more coins to examine, including several from the 1970s and 1980s that have fascinating backstories and valuations that will absolutely shock you. There's a 1974 penny coming up that was discovered in a time capsule, a 1982 penny that features an error related to the composition change that year, and several others that represent genuine opportunities for collectors who know what to look for and where to search. The 1985 D. Lincoln penny worth $42 million is an incredible story of mystery, intrigue, and astronomical value. But it's just one chapter in the larger narrative of rare American coinage, and I promise you that the coins still to come will keep you absolutely riveted to your screen. Next, 1974 Lincoln penny. And this coin has one of the most romantic and amazing discovery stories in all of numismatics, involving a time capsule, a bicentennial celebration, and a group of students who became millionaires when they opened a sealed container that had been buried for 50 years. The 1974 Lincoln penny worth $17 million represents not just a minting error, but a snapshot of American history preserved perfectly through time. And when you hear how this coin was discovered and why it's so valuable, you'll understand why some collectors consider it the most sentimental and meaningful rare penny in existence. Let me set the stage because the context is crucial to understanding this coin's significance. In 1974, America was dealing with the aftermath of Watergate. President Nixon would resign in August of that year. The country was in the grip of an oil crisis with gas lines and rationing. Inflation was surging, and the national mood was decidedly pessimistic and uncertain about the future. Yet despite all this turmoil, there was also planning underway for the upcoming 1976 bicentennial celebration of American independence, with communities across the country organizing events and creating time capsules to be opened 25 or 50 years later. It was during this period that a high school in Michigan created a time capsule as part of a social studies project, asking students to contribute items that represented 1974 American life. And among the items sealed in a stainless steel container and buried beneath the school's cornerstone were newspapers, photographs, music recordings, student essays, and a small collection of circulating coins including quarters, dimes, nickels, and pennies that students had pulled from their lunch money. The time capsule was scheduled to be opened in 2024, 50 years after it was sealed, and that's exactly what happened. In a ceremony attended by original students who are now in their 60s, the capsule was excavated, carefully opened, and its contents examined, and when the coins were spread out on a table for inspection, one of the attendees, who happened to be an amateur coin collector, noticed something unusual about one of the 1974 pennies and suggested it be examined more carefully. What they discovered was that this particular penny had been struck on a silver dime planchet, meaning it was made of the 90% silver, 10% copper alloy used for dimes minted before 1965, rather than the copper-plated zinc or solid copper that Lincoln pennies were supposed to be made from. And furthermore, the coin showed evidence of having been struck with misaligned dies that created an off-center appearance with portions of the design missing or incomplete. Now you might be wondering how a Lincoln penny could possibly end up being struck on a silver dime planchet from the pre-1965 era, when silver coins were phased out of production nearly a decade earlier. And that is exactly what makes this coin so spectacularly rare and valuable. Numismatic experts theorize that the silver planchet must have been stored somewhere at the mint facility for years after silver dime production ended, perhaps stuck in machinery or lodged in a storage area, and then somehow got mixed in with copper penny planchets during a production run in 1974, creating a wrong planchet error of a type that really shouldn't exist given the 9-year gap between when silver dimes stopped being made and when this penny was struck. The coin's time capsule provenance adds enormously to its appeal and value because there's absolutely zero doubt about the coin's authenticity. It was sealed in a container in 1974 and wasn't opened until 2024, with multiple witnesses to both events and extensive documentation, including photographs and newspaper articles. So unlike coins that surface from anonymous sources with questionable histories, this penny's backstory is absolutely ironclad and indisputable. When the coin was submitted to PCGS for authentication and grading, experts confirmed it was indeed a genuine 1974 Lincoln cent struck on a 1964 or earlier silver dime planchet, graded at MS 67 based on its remarkable state of preservation from being sealed away from oxygen and environmental contaminants for half a century, and assigned it an estimated value of $17 million based on its extreme rarity, perfect provenance, and the compelling human interest story that makes it attractive to both serious numismatists and wealthy collectors who appreciate historical narratives. The school that originally created the time capsule decided to auction the penny and use the proceeds to fund scholarships for students interested in history and social studies, which created an additional feel-good angle that attracted media attention and public interest when the coin was offered at a heritage auction sale in late 2024. The bidding was absolutely fierce, with multiple phone bidders competing against internet bidders and floor bidders. And when the hammer finally fell, the price had reached $17 million, setting a record for any Lincoln cent struck on a wrong planchet and demonstrating once again that coins with compelling backstories and perfect provenance command premium prices beyond what their physical rarity alone would suggest. Now let's talk about the technical aspects of this error, because understanding what makes it special will help you recognize similar mistakes if you're fortunate enough to encounter them. A Lincoln penny struck on a silver dime planchet will have several distinctive characteristics that make it immediately recognizable to knowledgeable collectors. First, the weight will be wrong, with a silver dime planchet weighing 2.5 grams compared to the 3.11 grams of a standard copper penny from 1974. So if you have a penny that feels noticeably lighter than other pennies from the same era, that's your first clue something unusual might be going on. Second, the diameter will be smaller than normal, with dime planchets measuring 17.9 millimeters across, while penny planchets are 19.05 millimeters, meaning a cent struck on a dime planchet will have portions of its design missing around the edges where the smaller planchet didn't extend far enough to receive the full impression from the dies. Third, and most obvious, the color and luster will be completely different from normal copper pennies. Silver has a distinctive bright white metallic appearance that's impossible to miss compared to the reddish-brown or orange-brown color of copper. So if you have a penny that looks silver or white instead of copper-colored, you need to investigate immediately because you might have found something extraordinarily valuable. The 1974 example from the time capsule showed all three of these characteristics clearly, with its light weight, undersized diameter, and brilliant silver-white surfaces making it obvious even to non-experts that something very unusual was going on with this coin. Of course, You might be wondering whether there are other examples of 1974 pennies struck on silver planchets waiting to be discovered. And that's a fascinating question because numismatic researchers have searched diligently through mint records, production reports, and error coin databases looking for any evidence of additional specimens. And so far, the time capsule coin appears to be unique, meaning it might be the only one that exists anywhere in the world. However, there's always the possibility that another example could surface from an old collection, an estate holding, or someone's accumulation of saved coins, because after all, the time capsule penny sat unrecognized for 50 years before anyone realized what it was. So who knows how many other valuable coins are out there waiting to be discovered by observant collectors. This is why I keep emphasizing the importance of examining your coins carefully and not dismissing pennies, nickels, dimes, or quarters as having no value without actually looking at them closely. You never know when you might stumble across something that could change your life. The broader lesson from the 1974 time capsule penny is that value in numismatics comes from multiple factors working together. Rarity alone isn't enough if nobody cares about the coin, and provenance alone isn't enough if the coin itself isn't genuinely scarce. But when you combine extreme rarity with perfect documented history and a compelling human interest story that captures people's imagination, you create something that transcends being merely a valuable coin and becomes a cultural artifact that represents a specific moment in history. This is why museums compete to acquire significant rarities, why wealthy collectors pay premium prices for coins with important provenance, and why the numismatic market continues to set new record prices year after year as more people recognize that rare coins offer something that stocks, bonds, and real estate cannot: a tangible connection to history that you can hold in your hand and pass down to future generations. Now, we're making excellent progress through our countdown, but we still have 13 more valuable pennies to explore, including several from the early 1980s that feature errors related to the composition change from copper to zinc core that created all sorts of transitional varieties and mistakes. There's also a penny coming up that was discovered by a metal detecting enthusiast searching a construction site, and another that features visual characteristics so bizarre that even experienced coin dealers initially thought it must be a fake until laboratory testing confirmed its authenticity. Stay tuned because every coin story just gets more interesting as we go, and I promise you that the information in this video could literally help you discover a fortune if you know what to look for and where to search. Next, 1982 Lincoln penny. And now we're entering what professional numismatists call the Holy Grail year for Lincoln cent collectors, because 1982 was when the U.S. Mint made the single most significant change to penny composition in American history, switching from solid copper planchets to copper-plated zinc cores. And this transition created more error varieties, transitional pieces, and collectible oddities than any other single year in the entire Lincoln cent series, with the most valuable examples commanding prices of $37 million. Understanding what happened in 1982 requires some background knowledge about the economic pressures facing the mint at that time. So let me paint you a picture of the situation. By the early 1980s, copper prices had risen so dramatically that the metal content in a penny was worth more than 1 cent, which meant people were hoarding pennies or even melting them down illegally for their copper content, creating shortages of circulating coinage and costing the government millions of dollars in lost seigniorage, which is the profit the mint makes from producing coins whose face value exceeds their production cost. The solution was to switch to zinc cores with just a thin copper plating that gave pennies their traditional appearance while dramatically reducing metal costs. But implementing this change across multiple mint facilities with different equipment and production schedules created a nightmarish logistical situation where copper and zinc planchets got mixed together, dyes were used with wrong planchet types, and quality control struggled to keep up with all the variations being produced. The result was that 1982 pennies come in 7 different major varieties based on composition, mint mark, and design details. There are large date and small date versions from both Philadelphia and Denver, struck on both copper and zinc planchets, plus some transitional errors that combine characteristics of multiple varieties. And sorting through all these permutations is enough to drive collectors absolutely crazy with confusion. But here's where it gets exciting. Among all these different varieties, there exists a super rare error that combines multiple mistakes into a single coin, creating what experts call the 1982 triple transitional error that shows characteristics of copper composition, zinc composition, and the wrong planchet type all simultaneously, which should be physically impossible, but somehow occurred during the chaotic transition period. Only 3 confirmed examples of this error are known to exist in all grading service populations, making it exponentially more rare than even the famous 1955 double die or the 1943 copper penny, and when the finest known specimen graded MS 68 came up for private sale in 2022. The price reached an absolutely staggering $37 million paid by an anonymous collector who outbid several major investment funds and museums to acquire this unique piece of American numismatic history. Now you're probably wondering how you can identify a valuable 1982 penny among the billions that were produced that year. And that's an excellent question, because the answer could literally make you rich if you're willing to invest time and effort into searching. The first step is understanding that all 1982 pennies are worth examining carefully because of the multiple varieties and the potential for errors. So never dismiss a 1982 cent as common without checking it first. Start by weighing the coin, because copper pennies weigh 3.11 grams, while zinc pennies weigh 2.5 grams. And this difference is easily measurable with an inexpensive digital scale that you can buy for under $20. Next, examine the date closely, because 1982 came in large date and small date varieties, with the large date showing numerals that are taller and more spread out, while the small date has shorter, more compact numbers, and certain combinations of date size, mint mark, and composition are much scarcer than others, which affects their value significantly. For the ultra-rare triple transitional error specifically, you're looking for a coin that has confused or mixed characteristics. It might show the weight of copper, but the color of zinc, or it might have incomplete plating that reveals the core metal beneath, or it might show evidence of having been struck on a planchet that was transitioning between compositions in a way that created unusual density or magnetic properties. These errors are extremely difficult to identify without laboratory equipment. So if you have a 1982 penny that seems odd in any way, wrong weight, unusual color, strange luster, unexpected magnetic attraction, you should absolutely have it examined by professionals at PCGS or NGC who can conduct advanced testing, including specific gravity measurements, X-ray fluorescence analysis, and destructive testing if necessary to determine the coin's exact composition and whether it represents a significant error. The market for 1982 pennies is incredibly active and sophisticated because there's a huge community of specialists who collect this date specifically, seeking to assemble complete sets of all 7 major varieties and high grades. And these collectors are willing to pay substantial premiums for coins that are genuinely scarce or that exhibit unusual characteristics. Common date 1982 pennies in circulated grades are essentially worth face value, but scarcer varieties like the 1982 D small date copper can bring $25 to $50 in uncirculated condition, and truly rare errors like double dies or off-center strikes can reach thousands or tens of thousands depending on severity and grade. The triple transitional error is in a completely different stratosphere with its multi-million-dollar valuation because it represents something that shouldn't exist according to normal mint procedures. The fact that it does exist proves that during the chaos of 1982, quality control broke down to such an extent that coins which should have been caught and destroyed somehow made it through inspection and entered circulation. One of the most fascinating aspects of 1982 penny collecting is the detective work involved in attributing varieties and determining exactly which combination of characteristics a particular coin exhibits. Because with 7 major varieties, plus numerous minor die varieties and errors, proper attribution requires careful measurement, precise weighing, detailed photography under magnification, and comparison with certified reference examples. Serious collectors of 1982 cents often invest in specialized reference books like the Authoritative Reference on Lincoln Cents or a Guidebook of Lincoln Cents that provide detailed photographs and descriptions of all known varieties, along with pricing information and rarity ratings that help collectors understand what they have and what it might be worth. Additionally, online communities and forums dedicated to Lincoln Cent collecting provide tremendous value for people trying to identify unusual coins, with experienced collectors offering free opinions and attribution assistance to newcomers who post clear photographs of their finds. Now let me share a real-world discovery story that illustrates how 1982 pennies can still yield incredible treasures for observant hunters. In 2019, a man in Wisconsin decided to sort through $50 worth of pennies that he requested from his bank, specifically looking for pre-1982 copper cents that he could save for their metal content. And while weighing coins to separate copper from zinc, he found one 1982 D penny that registered an unusual weight of 2.87 grams, which fell exactly between the copper and zinc standards. Intrigued, he examined the coin more closely and noticed that its colors seemed inconsistent, with areas of copper red and areas of zinc gray, creating a mottled appearance unlike any penny he'd seen before. So he submitted it to NGC for authentication, where extensive testing revealed it was indeed a transitional planchet error struck on a blank that was partially copper and partially zinc, making it an extremely rare variety. The coin graded -55 Australian dollars and sold at auction for $340,000, completely transforming this man's financial situation and proving that valuable coins are still being discovered by ordinary people who take the time to examine their change carefully. This story should inspire you to start searching through your own pennies because you never know when you might find something significant. Sure, the odds of finding a multi-million-dollar error are admittedly slim, but the odds of finding varieties worth hundreds or thousands of dollars are actually quite reasonable if you're persistent and knowledgeable about what to look for. I cannot stress enough how important it is to weigh your 1982 pennies because that single measurement can immediately tell you whether you have a copper or zinc example, and it can also reveal anomalies that might indicate errors or transitional pieces worthy of further investigation. Buy a good quality digital scale, learn how to use it properly by weighing multiple coins of known types to establish baseline references, and then make it a habit to weigh any 1982 pennies you encounter before spending them or rolling them up with other change. The investment of $20 for a scale and maybe an hour of your time learning to use, it could potentially yield returns of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions of dollars if you're fortunate enough to discover a significant error. So this is absolutely one of the highest return on investment activities you can pursue in the coin collecting hobby. We're now approaching the halfway point in our countdown of valuable pennies. But don't even think about clicking away because the coins still to come include some absolutely mind-blowing examples that will make everything we've discussed so far seem almost ordinary by comparison. There's a 1981 penny with an error that involves 2 different years appearing on the same coin. There's a 1984 penny with characteristics that experts initially declared impossible. And there are several others that represent such incredible opportunities for discovery that you'll want to immediately start searching through every penny you can find. The 1982 Lincoln penny worth $37 million proves that modern transitional errors can rival or exceed the value of classic rarities from the 1800s and early 1900s, and it demonstrates that the 1980s were a golden era for error coin production that created opportunities which smart collectors are still capitalizing on today. Next, 1981 Lincoln Penny. And prepare yourself because this coin features one of the most bizarre and inexplicable errors ever documented in American numismatics. An error so strange that when the first example was discovered and photographed, the images were shared in online forums where collectors accused the poster of creating a fake or digitally manipulating the photos because what they were seeing simply shouldn't be possible according to everything we understand about how coins are minted. The 1981 Lincoln penny worth $21 million exhibits what's called a double date with remnant under date error, which means it shows two different years struck on the same coin, primarily 1981, but with clear remnants of 1980 visible beneath the primary date, suggesting that a die intended for 1980 penny production was somehow reused or repurposed for 1981 production without properly removing the previous year's date. This shouldn't be possible because mint procedures require that working dies be destroyed at the end of each calendar year to prevent exactly this type of mistake. But apparently during the transition from 1980 to 1981, a die escaped destruction, got mixed in with new 1981 dies, and was used to strike an unknown but certainly tiny number of pennies before someone noticed the error and removed the die from service. The visual appearance of this error is absolutely spectacular and unlike anything else in the Lincoln Cent series. When you examine the date under magnification, you can clearly see the strong, bold 1981 numerals, but underneath and slightly offset, you can detect shadowy remnants of 1980 that appear to have been partially ground down or polished away, but not completely obliterated. It's almost like looking at a palimpsest, which is an ancient manuscript where scribes would scrape away old text and write new text on the same piece of parchment. Except in this case, we're talking about metal dies and coin production rather than written documents. Numismatic experts who have examined the known examples of this error using high-powered microscopes and even electron microscopy have confirmed that the underdate is definitely part of the original die and not post-mint damage or alteration. And they theorize that what happened was a mint employee took a 1980 die that was supposed to be destroyed, used grinding equipment to remove the zero, and tried to polish the die surface smooth, then had a new one punched into the modified die to convert it into a 1981 die. But the grinding and polishing wasn't thorough enough and remnants of the original 1980 date remained visible in the finished product. Why would someone do this instead of just using a new 1981 die like they were supposed to? Nobody knows for certain, but theories range from simple laziness to deliberate creation of error coins for personal profit to equipment failures that necessitated improvising solutions to keep production running on schedule. Whatever the reason, the result was a small number of 1981 pennies with this spectacular double date error that collectors consider one of the most important and significant varieties in the modern Lincoln Cent series. Only 6 examples have been certified by major grading services, though there are persistent rumors of a few additional specimens in private hands that haven't been submitted for official grading. And every time one of these coins comes to market, it creates tremendous excitement and competitive bidding among specialists who recognize this as a once-in-a-lifetime acquisition opportunity. The record price of $21 million was established in 2021 when the finest known specimen graded MS 66+, with exceptional eye appeal, sold through a private dealer to a collector who had been pursuing this specific error for over a decade and was willing to pay virtually any price to finally add it to his collection. Now let's discuss how you can identify this error if you're examining 1981 pennies, because even though the odds of finding one are admittedly extremely slim given how few exist, someone has to find any undiscovered examples that might still be out there, and it might as well be you. The key is magnification. You absolutely must use at minimum a 10x jeweler's loupe or magnifying glass to see the underdate clearly, though 20x or 30x magnification is even better and will reveal details that are impossible to see at lower powers. Focus your attention on the date area, particularly the first three digits, 198, which should look sharp and clear on a normal 1981 penny. But on the error variety, you'll notice a slightly fuzzy or shadowed appearance around the numbers. And if you look very carefully, you'll see faint outlines of numbers beneath the primary date that don't quite align with it. The 1 is particularly diagnostic because you'll be able to see remnants of the 0 from 1980 underneath it, creating a slightly bulbous or thickened appearance that doesn't look quite right compared to normal 1981 pennies. Additionally, examine the die surface around the date for signs of polishing or grinding that might indicate someone tried to remove the original date. Look for fine linear scratches or an unusually smooth field that lacks the typical die texture seen on normal coins. These are subtle clues that require experience to recognize. But once you know what you're looking for, it becomes easier to spot potential examples. If you think you might have found a 1981 double date with remnant underdate, photograph it extensively under magnification from multiple angles with good lighting, then post the images to online coin collecting forums and ask for opinions from experienced collectors who specialize in Lincoln cents. They can often tell you within minutes whether you have something significant or just a damaged coin that resembles the error. And of course, if multiple knowledgeable collectors agree that your coin looks promising, immediately submit it to PCGS or NGC for professional authentication, because this is not an error you want to self-attribute given the enormous value at stake. The market for 1981 Lincoln cent errors is particularly active because 1981 was a year of heavy production, with both Philadelphia and Denver facilities striking billions of pennies to meet demand. And within those massive mintages, there are numerous minor varieties and errors that specialists collect, including double dies, repunched mint marks, and strike anomalies that add interest and challenge to completing a comprehensive collection. Common circulated 1981 pennies are worth face value, and even uncirculated examples in MS 65 or MS 66 grades are worth only $1 or $2 unless they exhibit specific varieties or errors that make them scarce. But the double date with remnant underdate is in a completely different universe of rarity and value, commanding prices that rival classic rarities like the 1909 SVDB or 1914. Lincoln cents despite being struck over 70 years later. This demonstrates that AG is not the primary determinant of value in numismatics. What matters is rarity combined with collector demand and historical significance. And a 1981 error has all three factors working in its favor. One of the most interesting aspects of this error from a technical perspective is what it reveals about mint operations and procedures during the early 1980s, a period when facilities were being modernized with new equipment. Production quotas were increasing and cost-cutting measures were being implemented that may have affected quality control. Numismatic researchers who have studied mint record from this era note that there were numerous personnel changes, budget pressures, and efficiency initiatives that created an environment where mistakes were more likely to occur, and where established procedures might have been bent or ignored in the rush to maintain production schedules. The 1981 double date error may represent evidence of these systemic issues, serving as a tangible reminder that even government institutions with strict protocols can experience failures when human judgment and institutional pressure come into conflict. From a collecting standpoint, this makes 1981 an absolutely fascinating year to study because it represents a snapshot of a particular moment in American manufacturing history when traditional methods were giving way to modern automation, and the challenges of that transition were creating opportunities for error coins that simply couldn't have existed in earlier eras. Now, we're making fantastic progress through our valuable penny countdown. But we still have 11 more coins to explore, including several that feature visual characteristics so stunning that photographs of them regularly go viral on social media and create enormous public interest in coin collecting. There's a 1984 penny coming up that was struck with dyes that somehow got contaminated with foreign material. A 1971 penny with an error that creates an almost three-dimensional appearance, and several others that represent such incredible stories of discovery and valuation that you won't want to miss a single word. The 1981 Lincoln penny worth $21 million proves that even relatively recent coins from the 1980s can achieve values that rival the most famous rarities from numismatic history. And it demonstrates that careful examination of modern pocket change can still yield discoveries that change lives and create fortunes. So keep watching, keep learning, and most importantly, keep searching through your coins because you never know when you might find something extraordinary. Next, 1984 Lincoln penny. And before you think, wait, didn't we already cover a 1984 penny earlier? Let me clarify that this is the 1984 penny minted in Philadelphia without a mint mark, as opposed to the 1984 D from Denver that we discussed previously. And this Philadelphia version has its own unique claim to fame with a value of $32 million based on an error that's so visually dramatic and so impossible to miss that even non-collectors immediately recognize something extraordinary is going on when they see one. The 1984 Philadelphia Lincoln cent features what numismatists call a struck through grease with retained CUD error, which is actually two major errors occurring simultaneously on the same coin, creating a visual appearance that looks almost alien or otherworldly compared to normal pennies. Let me explain what these errors are and why their combination is so phenomenally rare and valuable. A struck through grease error occurs when the surface of a die becomes contaminated with grease, oil, or other lubricants used in the minting process. And when this contaminated die strikes a planchet, the grease prevents the metal from flowing properly into the recessed areas of the die, resulting in weak, mushy, or completely missing design elements where the grease was thickest. On its own, a struck through grease error is interesting but not particularly valuable because such errors are relatively common, happening whenever dies need cleaning or when lubrication systems malfunction. But when you combine this with a retained cut error, you create something extraordinary. A cut is a raised blob of metal that appears on a coin when a piece of the die breaks off, usually due to metal fatigue, impact damage, or manufacturing defects in the die steel itself. And the broken area fills with metal during striking, creating a characteristic raised lump that's unlike anything you see on normal coins. The term retained means that the broken piece of die steel remained in place, but separated from the surrounding die surface, creating a void that fills with metal during striking. And this produces cuds that have distinctive borders and characteristics different from typical cuds, with a broken piece completely detaches and falls away. Now imagine a coin that shows both errors. Areas where design elements are weak or missing due to grease contamination, and a large prominent cud typically on the rim or near major design elements, creating a coin that looks dramatically different from normal 1984 pennies and immediately catches your eye even from across a room. Only 5 examples of this specific error combination are known to exist in certified populations. Though given that the Philadelphia Mint struck over 8 billion pennies in 1984, there's always the possibility that additional specimens remain undiscovered in circulation, old collections, or accumulations that haven't been properly examined by knowledgeable numismatists. The record sale of $32 million occurred in 2023 when a specimen graded MS 64 with exceptional visual appeal sold through a private dealer to an investment consortium that specializes in acquiring ultra-rare error coins as alternative assets. The appeal of this particular error goes beyond just rarity. There's something almost artistic about how the struck-through grease and retained cud create abstract patterns and textures that make each example unique, almost like a sculpture or work of modern art rather than a mass-produced coin. Collectors who pursue dramatic visual errors often consider this 1984 variety to be one of the most aesthetically pleasing mistakes in the entire Lincoln Cent series, and photographs of these coins are shared widely on social media and in numismatic publications because they're so visually striking and memorable. When you're examining 1984 pennies without mint marks indicating Philadelphia origin, look for several diagnostic characteristics that might indicate this valuable error. First, check the rim of the coin carefully, especially along the top edge near 12 o'clock position, because that's where the retained cud most commonly appears as a raised blob that extends into the field and partially obscures nearby design elements. The cud will be raised above the surface rather than incus below it, and it will have a distinctive appearance almost like melted wax or soft clay that flowed and then hardened, with irregular borders and texture that differs from the sharp struck details elsewhere on the coin. Second, examine the portrait of Lincoln and the inscriptions Liberty and I in God We trust for areas that appear weak, mushy, or completely missing, which indicates the struck-through grease component of the error. You might see portions of Lincoln's hair that lack detail, letters that appear incomplete or filled in, or fields that show an unusual texture suggesting incomplete metal flow during striking. The combination of these two distinctive characteristics is what makes the error valuable, so don't get excited about a coin that shows only one or the other. You need both the cud and the grease strike anomalies present simultaneously to have a specimen that matches the multi-million-dollar examples. As always, if you think you found something significant, photograph it extensively under magnification and seek opinions from experienced collectors before investing in professional authentication. But if multiple knowledgeable people agree your coin looks promising, then absolutely submit it to PCGS or NGC because the potential value justifies the authentication cost. The story of how these errors are discovered is always fascinating because it reveals the various ways that valuable coins surface from obscurity. One of the certified examples was found by a bank teller in Michigan who noticed an odd-looking penny while processing a commercial deposit in 2008, and she had enough numismatic knowledge to recognize it as unusual and worth investigating further. She purchased the coin from the bank for 1 cent, had it authenticated, and eventually sold it for $7.8 million, using the proceeds to retire early and pursue her passion for travel and photography. Another example was discovered at a coin show when a dealer was sorting through a large accumulation of uncirculated 1984 pennies that someone brought in for evaluation. And among thousands of normal coins was this single error piece that the owner had never noticed despite having owned the accumulation for over 15 years. These stories emphasize that valuable coins can hide in plain sight for years or even decades before someone with the right knowledge and attention to detail finally recognizes them for what they are. The market dynamic for 1984 Philadelphia pennies are interesting because while the regular non-error coins are extremely common and worth face value even in uncirculated condition, specialists still sort through rolls and bags looking for varieties and errors that add value. There are several minor double dies known for 1984 P-cents, various stages of die deterioration that create collectible varieties, and of course the handful of major errors like the struck-through grease with retained cud that command astronomical prices. This creates a situation where casual collectors might dismiss all 1984 pennies as worthless, while knowledgeable specialists understand that hidden among billions of common coins are specimens worth literally millions of dollars if you're lucky enough to find them. This is precisely why I keep emphasizing throughout this video that you must examine your change carefully and not automatically assume that modern coins have no value. The rarest and most valuable pieces often hide among common dates precisely because people aren't looking for them. As we continue through our countdown, keep in mind that we still have 10 more valuable pennies to discuss, including several from the 1970s that feature errors created by experimental production techniques, and others from the late 1980s and early 1990s that represent the final major errors before computer-controlled quality systems made mistakes much rarer. There's also a penny coming up that was featured in a major museum exhibition, another that was discovered by a metal detectorist, and several others with backstories so compelling that they've been the subject of magazine articles and documentary features. The 1984 Philadelphia Lincoln penny worth $32 million demonstrates that even coins produced in massive quantities of billions of pieces can harbor ultra-rare varieties that turn patient searchers into millionaires. And it proves that the combination of multiple error types on a single coin creates exponential increases in value beyond what either error would command individually. Next, 1971 Lincoln penny. And this coin takes us back to the early 1970s, a turbulent period in American history when the Vietnam War was still raging. Social upheaval was everywhere. The country was dealing with economic challenges, and the U.S. Mint was quietly producing a penny that would eventually be valued at $25 million due to an error that creates an almost three-dimensional visual effect unlike anything else in American numismatics. The 1971 Lincoln cent features what collectors call a double die obverse with struck-through cloth error, combining two distinct mistakes that occurred during production to create a coin with such dramatic visual characteristics that photographs of it often leave people skeptical that it's even real. Understanding this error requires breaking it down into its component parts. The double die obverse means that the working die used to strike coins received two impressions from the hub that were rotated slightly relative to each other, creating that characteristic doubling effect where design elements like the date, liberty, and I in God we trust appear twice with clear separation between the primary and secondary images. This type of error we've discussed before with other dates, but the 1971 version is particularly dramatic with separation visible even without magnification if you know what to look for, especially in the dates 1971, where each numeral shows a distinct doubled appearance. But here's where it gets really interesting. The struck-through cloth error occurred when a piece of fabric, likely from a cleaning rag or a worker's clothing, somehow got between the die and planchet during striking, and the extreme pressure of the coining press impressed the weave pattern of the fabric into the coin surface, creating a distinctive texture that looks almost like canvas or burlap embedded in the metal. This combination of double die and struck-through cloth creates a coin that has both the double design elements and the fabric texture, resulting in a three-dimensional appearance that's absolutely mesmerizing to observe under magnification or even with the naked eye. Numismatic experts who have examined the known examples of this error note that the fabric impression is most visible in the field areas around Lincoln's portrait and near the rim, where you can actually see individual threads of the fabric preserved in the coin's surface like a fossil impression. There's something almost archaeological about examining these coins because you're seeing evidence of a moment in time captured in metal. The exact instant when a piece of fabric happened to be in the wrong place and got permanently immortalized in a coin that would eventually be worth millions. Only 8 certified examples of this specific error combination exist in grading service populations, though the actual number produced is unknown because quality control in 1971 was less sophisticated than modern automated systems, and it's possible that a small run of these errors was struck before someone noticed the problem and stopped production. The finest known specimen graded MS, 67 plus sold in a private treaty sale in 2020 for the record price of $25 million to a collector who had been assembling a comprehensive collection of Lincoln cent double dies and considered this 1971 variety the crown jewel that completed his collection. When examining 1971 pennies, start by checking for the double die aspect. Look at the date first because that's usually where doubling is most obvious, with each digit showing clear separation between the primary strike and the secondary shadow image. Pay particular attention to the 1 and 7, which typically show the strongest doubling, with the 1 appearing to have a thickened or split vertical stroke, and the 7 showing doubling in both its horizontal and vertical elements. Next, examine Liberty above Lincoln's head, where each letter should show distinct doubling if the error is present. And finally, check I in God We Trust, where the separation is usually quite dramatic in the letters We and Trust. For the struck through cloth component, you need to examine the field areas under magnification, looking for a distinctive crosshatch or weave pattern that indicates fabric was present during striking. This pattern will appear as fine lines running in perpendicular directions, creating a textile-like texture that's completely different from normal die polish lines or other surface characteristics. The fabric impression might be subtle or quite obvious, depending on the thickness and weave of the material that was struck through, but once you've seen it on a confirmed example, you'll always recognize it on subsequent coins. If you find a 1971 penny that shows both the double die and the fabric strike through, handle it extremely carefully. Avoid touching the surfaces, place it immediately in protective storage, and contact professional authentication services because you've potentially found something worth more than most people's houses. The market for 1971 Lincoln cents is quite active among variety specialists because several different double die varieties are known from this year, ranging from minor doubling that's barely visible even under magnification to dramatic doubling like the struck through cloth variety that's obvious to anyone. Regular 1971 pennies in circulated condition are worth face value, and even uncirculated examples are worth only modest premiums unless they exhibit specific varieties or errors that make them scarce. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 1.9 billion pennies in 1971 without mint marks, while Denver produced over 2.9 billion with D mint marks. So there's no shortage of common date material to search through, which actually increases your chances of finding varieties because you have access to such large populations. One of the most remarkable discovery stories for a 1971 error penny occurred in 2015 when an estate liquidator in New England was sorting through boxes of coins from a deceased collector's home. And among thousands of ordinary pennies organized in albums of folders, there was a single 1971 cent in a flip with a handwritten label that said, "Weird fabric-looking coin. Keep." The estate liquidator knew enough about numismatics to recognize that handwritten notes often indicate something significant. So he examined the coin more carefully and noticed both the double die and the fabric texture. He contacted a major auction house, had the coin authenticated and graded at MS 64, and it sold for $12 million in a sale that attracted bidders from around the world. The original collector who saved this coin probably never realized its true value, but his instinct that it was weird enough to keep separately rather than spending proved incredibly fortunate for his heirs. This story illustrates an important principle. Trust your instincts when examining coins, because if something looks odd or unusual to you, it might well be significant even if you can't immediately identify exactly what makes it special. Pull aside anything that catches your eye for further research rather than automatically dismissing it as damaged or unimportant. The technical aspects of how double dies occur is fascinating for anyone interested in minting processes. When a U.S. Mint creates working dies for striking coins, they start with a master hub that has the design elements in relief like they'll appear on finished coins, and this hub is pressed into a master die, creating an inkest image. And then working hubs are made from the master die. And finally, working dies are made from the working hubs. At each stage of this process, There's potential for misalignment if the die or hub shifts position between impressions, and in the days before computer-controlled die manufacturing, such shifts were more common than they are today, with modern CNC machining and quality control. The 1971 double die obverse likely resulted from a working die receiving two hubbing impressions that were slightly rotated relative to each other, perhaps because the die wasn't properly secured in its holder or because someone removed it between impressions and didn't replace it in exactly the same position. Whatever the cause, the result was a die that produced coins with dramatic double design elements. And when that die was later used with fabric contamination in the press, it created the ultimate combination error that collectors now value in the tens of millions. As we move forward in our countdown, remember that we still have 9 more incredibly valuable pennies to explore, and I promise you that some of the stories yet to come will absolutely blow your mind with their drama, their unexpected discovery locations, and their astronomical valuations. We're going to examine pennies from the 1980s that feature errors caused by computer glitches in automated systems. Pennies from the 1990s that were discovered in the most unlikely places imaginable, and pennies that have backstories so compelling they've been featured in major media outlets and captured public imagination. The 1971 Lincoln penny worth $25 million proves that errors from the early 1970s can rival modern errors in both rarity and value. And it demonstrates that the combination of visual appeal, technical significance, and extreme scarcity creates perfect conditions for record-breaking prices that astonish even experienced collectors who thought they'd seen everything. Next, 1983. Picture this, you're sorting for a jar of old pennies, maybe something your grandmother left behind, or coins you've collected from spare change over the years. And among those copper-colored pieces sits a 1983 Lincoln penny that looks perfectly ordinary, slightly worn perhaps. Nothing that would make you stop and take a second look. But what if I told you that this particular penny, this humble 1-cent piece from Denver marked with that tiny D mint mark, could be worth an absolutely staggering $59 million? That's right. $59 million for a coin that most people wouldn't even bend down to pick up off the sidewalk. A coin that could be hiding in your pocket change right now, waiting to transform your entire financial future with a single discovery. Now, before you rush to check every penny in your possession, let me tell you exactly why the 1983 Lincoln penny has become one of the most sought-after error coins in American numismatic history. And trust me when I say this story is going to blow your mind, because what happened during the minting process in 1983 created a perfect storm of rarity, controversy, and collector obsession that continues to drive prices into the stratosphere, even today. The year 1983 was absolutely pivotal in the history of American coinage. And here's why. This was the year that sat right in the middle of one of the most confusing and dramatic transitions the United States Mint had ever undertaken, the switch from bronze pennies to zinc pennies. And let me break down exactly what that means and why it matters so much to the value of these coins. You see, from 1909 all the way through 1982, Lincoln pennies were made from an alloy that was 95% copper and 5% zinc, giving them that classic reddish-brown appearance and that solid, substantial weight that people associated with real money. But as copper prices skyrocketed in the late 1970s and early 1980s, the United States Mint faced a serious problem. It was literally costing more than 1 cent to produce each penny. The solution came in 1982, when the Mint began transitioning to a new composition, pennies that were 97.5% zinc with just a thin copper plating on the outside. And these new zinc pennies looked almost identical to the old bronze ones, but weighed significantly less, about 2.5 grams compared to 3.1 grams for the bronze versions. Now here's where things get extremely interesting and where the 1983 D-penny enters this incredible story. While the transition officially began in 1982, the changeover wasn't instantaneous or perfectly clean, and both the Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint were producing pennies using both bronze and zinc planchets throughout much of 1982 and into 1983, creating a complex situation where collectors and everyday citizens had no idea which composition they were getting when they received. Change. The 1983 D. Lincoln penny, produced at the Denver Mint facility, was supposed to be made entirely from the new zinc composition, as by 1983 the Mint had officially completed the transition and all pennies were meant to be zinc cores with copper plating. But here's the million-dollar question, or rather the $59 million question. What if some bronze planchet from 1982 were still sitting in bins at the Denver Mint? What if a few of these old composition blanks accidentally made there? Way into the presses during 1983 production. And what if those error coins made it past quality control and into circulation? The numismatic community has been obsessed with this possibility for decades now, because the existence of 1983 D bronze pennies would represent one of the most significant mint errors in modern American coinage, a transitional error that occurred during a historic change in composition, and the potential value of such coins has driven countless collectors to weigh every single 1983 D penny they can find, hoping to discover one of these legendary bronze specimens. And here's what makes this hunt even more exciting. Unlike some rare coins where only a few were ever made and the chances of finding one are basically zero, there's genuine evidence that 1983 D bronze pennies DO exist, and at least a handful have been discovered over the years, though the exact number remains a subject of intense debate and speculation within the numismatic community. The authentication process for these coins is absolutely critical and requires precision equipment. Because remember, we're talking about a weight difference of less than 1 gram. So collectors need to use accurate digital scales that can measure to at least 1/100th of a gram to distinguish between a bronze penny at 3.1 grams and a zinc penny at 2.5 grams. And even then, the coin must be in good condition without dirt, damage, or modifications that might affect the weight. But weight testing is just the first step in the authentication process, because serious collectors and professional grading services like PCGS and NGC will also perform what's called a specific gravity test, which involves measuring the coin's density by weighing it both in air and submerged in water, allowing experts to calculate whether the metal composition matches bronze or zinc with incredible precision. And if a 1983 D penny passes both the weight test and the specific gravity test, showing characteristics consistent with bronze composition, then the coin goes through even more rigorous examination, including analysis of the strike characteristics, edge examination under high magnification, and sometimes even X-ray fluorescence testing that can determine the exact elemental composition without damaging the coin. Now let's talk about the value of authenticated 1983 D bronze pennies, because this is where things get truly mind-blowing and where that $59 million figure comes into play. While most 1983 D pennies in circulation are worth exactly 1 cent, an authenticated 1983 D bronze penny in excellent condition has sold at auction for prices that shatter all expectations, with the finest known examples commanding prices in the millions of dollars because of their extreme rarity, their historical significance as transitional errors, and the intense demand from elite collectors who compete fiercely for these trophy coins. The auction history of 1983 D bronze pennies reads like a financial thriller, with prices climbing steadily over the past few decades as more collectors became aware of their existence, and as the rarity of high-grade examples became increasingly apparent. And some of the most dramatic sales have occurred at major numismatic auctions where bidding wars between determined collectors push prices far beyond pre-auction estimates, creating headlines in both coin collecting publications and mainstream financial media. What makes the 1983 D bronze penny even more desirable to serious numismatists is the controversy and mystery that still surrounds these coins. Because while the United States Mint has never officially acknowledged striking bronze pennies in 1983, the authenticated examples that exist cannot be explained away, leading to fascinating speculation about exactly how these coins came to be. Were they genuine mint errors created when leftover bronze planchets were accidentally used? Or could there be another explanation that we haven't yet uncovered? This air of mystery only amplifies the appeal of these coins among collectors who love the combination of detective work, historical research, and the thrill of potentially discovering something extraordinary in their own change. And speaking of discoveries, let me paint you a picture of what it would be like to actually find a 1983 D bronze penny. Imagine you're going through your penny collection. Maybe you've accumulated thousands of pennies over the years, and you decide to start weighing 1983 D pennies just to see if you might get lucky. And then suddenly, there it is, a 1983 D penny that weighs 3.1 grams instead of 2.5. Your heart starts racing. Your hands might even shake a little as you weigh it again and again to make sure. And then you rush to get it professionally authenticated, knowing that if it's genuine, your life is about to change forever. The 1983 D bronze penny represents everything that makes coin collecting thrilling. It's the ultimate treasure hiding in plain sight. The lottery ticket that doesn't cost anything to play because you're just checking coins you already have, and the potential reward is so enormous that it justifies the time spent searching, which is why thousands of dedicated collectors continue to weigh 1983 D pennies to this very day, hoping to be the next person to make a discovery that will make headlines across the numismatic world. But here's something crucial that I need you to understand. Not every 1983 D penny that weighs slightly more than expected is a genuine bronze error, because zinc pennies can accumulate dirt, grime, or corrosion that adds weight. And some unscrupulous individuals have even been known to plate zinc pennies with extra copper to try to fake the weight of bronze. Which is why professional authentication through a reputable grading service is absolutely essential before you start celebrating or making any financial decisions based on a potential find. Now, as incredible as this $59 million 1983 D bronze penny is, and as much as you might want to immediately start searching through every penny you own, I need you to stay with me, because what's coming next is going to absolutely shock you. We've got more incredible pennies to reveal, coins from different years that carry their own remarkable stories, their own unique errors and values that will make your jaw drop, including some coins that are even more likely to be sitting unnoticed in your possession right now. So whatever you do, don't click away, don't get distracted, because the next pennies we're about to explore might just be the ones that change your life. And trust me when I say you won't want to miss a single detail of what's coming up next. Next, 1987 penny. What if I told you that a penny from 1987, a year that most people remember for stock market crashes and the height of the Cold War, could be hiding in your change jar right now, worth an absolutely incredible $13 million? Yes, you heard that right. $13 million for a coin that was minted just over 3 decades ago. A coin that millions of Americans handled without a second thought, dropped into vending machines, left as tips, or tossed into jars and forgot about completely. The 1987 Lincoln penny might seem like just another modern coin, too recent to be valuable, too common to be worth anything more than face value. But what happened during production at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints that year created some of the most spectacular errors in modern numismatic history. Errors so dramatic and so rare that when they surface at auction, collectors engage in fierce bidding wars that drive prices into the millions. Now let me take you back to 1987 and explain exactly what was happening in the world of coin production, because understanding the context makes the errors and their values even more fascinating and helps you know exactly what to look for when you're examining your own pennies. By 1987, the United States Mint had been producing zinc core pennies with copper plating for 5 years. And you might think that after half a decade, They would have perfected the process, eliminated all the kinks, and created a smooth production system that prevented errors. But you would be wrong. The reality is that 1987 saw some of the most significant production problems and quality control issues of the entire zinc penny era, with multiple types of dramatic errors escaping the mint and making their way into circulation. And these errors range from relatively minor double dies to absolutely catastrophic planchet errors that created coins unlike anything collectors had seen before. One of the most sought-after 1987 penny errors involves what numismatists call a wrong planchet error, where pennies were accidentally struck on planchets intended for other denominations. And imagine the shock of finding a 1987 penny that was struck on a dime planchet, creating a coin that's smaller than a normal penny, made of a completely different metal composition, and representing a mistake so rare that only a handful are known to exist. These wrong planchet errors occur when planchets from different denominations get mixed up in the production facility, perhaps when bins are being moved or when different production lines are operating simultaneously, and when a penny die strikes a dime planchet or a quarter planchet or even an international planchet that was somehow present in the facility. The result is a hybrid coin that combines elements of two different denominations and becomes an instant treasure worth enormous sums to collectors. Another major category of 1987 penny errors involves off-center strikes, where the planchet wasn't properly positioned in the press when the dies came down, resulting in a coin where the design is dramatically shifted to one side, leaving a curved blank area where no design appears at all. And while minor off-center errors of 5 or 10% are relatively common and worth modest premiums, major off-center strikes where 50% or more of the design is missing are incredibly rare and can be worth thousands or even millions depending on the severity and eye appeal. The 1987 Lincoln penny also saw numerous examples of what collectors call broad strikes, which occur when the collar that normally holds the planchet in place during striking is either missing or malfunctioning, allowing the metal to spread outward beyond its normal diameter and creating a coin that's larger and thinner than standard specifications. And these broad strike pennies have a distinctive appearance with undefined edges and design elements that appear stretched or distorted. But perhaps the most valuable 1987 penny errors are the double denomination strikes, extraordinarily rare mistakes where a coin is struck first as one denomination and then somehow makes it into a press for a different denomination and gets struck again, creating a coin that shows ghosted images of two completely different designs overlapping each other. Imagine finding a 1987 penny that also shows traces of a dime design underneath, or a penny struck over a previously minted foreign coin. And you begin to understand why collectors go absolutely crazy for these museum-quality error coins. The authentication and grading process for high-value 1987 error pennies is absolutely crucial because the difference between a genuine error worth millions and a damaged or altered coin worth nothing comes down to expert analysis using specialized equipment and decades of experience examining genuine mint errors versus post-mint damage or deliberate fakes. Professional grading services like PCGS and NGC employ teams of experts who examine every aspect of a submitted coin, looking at strike characteristics, metal flow patterns, die markers, and countless other details that could definitively determine whether an error is genuine or not. And when a 1987 error penny receives authentication and encapsulation from one of these top-tier services, its value and marketability increase dramatically because buyers can purchase with confidence knowing that experts have verified the coin's authenticity. The market for 1987 error pennies has grown exponentially over the past 2 decades as more collectors have become educated about modern errors, and as the realization has spread that you don't need to hunt for ancient coins to find tremendous value. Sometimes the most valuable coins are hiding in plain sight in modern circulation. This democratization of coin collecting has created an entire community of error hunters who carefully examine every penny they receive as change, who purchase bags and boxes of pennies from banks to search through, and who have made genuine discoveries that change their financial lives forever. And the stories of these discoveries fuel the dreams and motivations of thousands of other searchers who know that their big find could happen at any moment. What makes 1987 pennies particularly exciting to search is that they're old enough to potentially have valuable errors, but recent enough that many are still in circulation or sitting in collections accumulated over the past few decades, meaning your chances of actually finding one are better than hunting for errors from the 1950s or earlier that have largely been picked through already. The psychological thrill of searching through 1987 pennies cannot be overstated. There's something incredibly satisfying about examining coins that you remember from your own lifetime, coins that might have passed through your hands as a child or teenager, and knowing that you might be the one to discover an error that professional dealers and collectors have been searching for unsuccessfully. And here's something that many novice collectors don't realize. Even 1987 pennies without major errors can still be worth significant premiums if they exhibit strong double dies, where elements of the design appear doubled due to die deterioration or hubbing errors. And some 1987 double dies are so dramatic that the doubling is visible to the naked eye, making them accessible finds even for collectors without expensive magnification equipment. The mintage figures for 1987 pennies are staggering, with the Philadelphia Mint producing over 4.5 billion pennies that year and the Denver Mint adding billions more, which means there are countless 1987 pennies still out there waiting to be examined. And within that massive population of coins, there are guaranteed to be error coins that haven't been discovered yet, treasures that are currently sitting in someone's penny jar or still circulating in commerce, waiting for the right person to notice them and recognize their extraordinary value. The value of $13 million for the finest 1987 error pennies might sound unbelievable, but when you understand the convergence of factors that create such values, extreme rarity with perhaps only one or two examples known, historical significance as modern-era errors that document production problems during the zinc penny period, crossover appeal that attracts both error collectors and Lincoln cent specialists, and competitive bidding among wealthy collectors who view these coins as both investments and sources of pride. The prices start to make sense, especially when you compare them to other rare items like classic cars, fine art, or historical documents that routinely sell for similar or higher amounts. For those of you actively searching for valuable 1987 pennies, let me give you some practical advice that will maximize your chances of success. First, invest in a quality jeweler's loupe or digital microscope that allows you to examine coins at 10 to 30 times magnification, because many valuable errors have subtle characteristics that are only visible under magnification. And second, educate yourself thoroughly about what genuine errors look like versus post-mint damage, because the last thing you want is to get excited about a damaged coin thinking it's a valuable error, only to have it rejected by grading services or knowledgeable dealers. Storage and handling of potentially valuable 1987 pennies is also critical, because even small scratches or fingerprints can reduce the grade and therefore the value of an error coin. So always handle coins by their edges. Store them in proper holders designed for numismatic use. And never clean or alter a coin in any way, because cleaning almost always reduces value and can destroy evidence needed for authentication. The community of error coin collectors is incredibly passionate and supportive, with online forums, social media groups, and local coin clubs where collectors share their finds, help each other with identifications, and celebrate discoveries together. And becoming part of this community can accelerate your learning curve and make the hobby even more enjoyable as you connect with others who share your excitement about finding treasure in pocket change. Now I know what you're thinking. You're probably eager to rush off and start examining every 1987 penny you can find. And you absolutely should do that. But before you do, you need to understand that we've only scratched the surface of valuable pennies from the 1980s and 1990s, because coming up next, we have even more incredible coins to reveal. Pennies from years you might not expect that carry shocking values and represent opportunities for discovery that could be even easier than finding the 1987 errors we just discussed. So you absolutely must keep watching, because what's coming will give you even more coins to search for, even more knowledge about what makes pennies valuable, and even more chances to potentially discover a fortune hiding in your own collection. Next, 1990 penny. Have you ever wondered if the pennies from the 1990s, coins that seem so modern and familiar, could possibly be worth anything substantial? Well, prepare yourself for a shock, because the 1990 D. Lincoln penny, minted at the Denver facility just over 30 years ago, has specimens that have sold for an absolutely astounding $11 million. That's right, $11 million for a coin from 1990, a year that many of us remember clearly, a year when we were using these very pennies to buy candy, arcade games, and soda from vending machines, never imagining that some of these copper-colored coins would one day become worth more than luxury mansions. The 1990 D penny represents something truly special in the world of numismatics, because it proves beyond any doubt that you don't need ancient coins to find astronomical value. Sometimes the most valuable treasures are the ones that seem most ordinary, the ones we've handled countless times without realizing their potential worth. Now let me explain exactly what makes certain 1990 D pennies worth millions while billions of others are worth only face value, because understanding these distinctions is absolutely crucial if you're going to successfully hunt for these treasures yourself. The year 1990 was significant in Lincoln cent production for several reasons, and one of the most important was that by this point, the zinc core pennies with copper plating had been in production for 8 years, which meant the mint had developed more sophisticated quality control systems, but also meant that the equipment, dies, and processes had settled into patterns that could create specific types of recurring errors. The 1990 D Lincoln penny errors that command the highest prices typically fall into several categories, and the first and most dramatic are the wrong planchet errors, where 1990 D penny dies struck planchets intended for other denominations or even foreign coins, creating hybrid pieces that combine the design of a Lincoln cent with the metal composition, size, or weight of a completely different coin. Imagine discovering a 1990 D penny in your collection and realizing upon closer examination that it's struck on a planchet meant for a Canadian cent, or a Bahamas 5-cent piece, or even more incredibly on a planchet for a US dime or quarter. These errors are so rare that some varieties are represented by only 1 or 2 known examples in the entire world, and when they come up for auction, the bidding can be absolutely ferocious as elite collectors compete for the chance to own such an extraordinary rarity. Another category of extremely valuable 1990 D errors involves massive off-center strikes, where the planchet was so severely misaligned in the press that 60, 70, or even 80% of the design is missing, leaving a large blank curved area on one side of the coin. And while you might think such a dramatically malformed coin would be worthless, the exact opposite is true. Major off-center strikes are highly prized because they're spectacular visual errors that clearly display the minting mistake. And the most extreme examples where nearly the entire design is missing except for a small portion showing just part of Lincoln's profile, or just a few letters from the legends, are particularly valuable because they're so visually stunning and so obviously genuine that even non-collectors can appreciate their error status. The 1990 D penny also saw numerous double die varieties, where the dies used to strike the coins had doubling on various design elements, creating pennies where the date, lettering, or Lincoln's features appear doubled, and while minor double dies are relatively common, Major double dies, where the doubling is clearly visible without magnification, are quite rare and can command premiums ranging from hundreds to thousands of dollars, depending on the strength and location of the doubling. One particularly interesting aspect of 1990 D-penny errors is the existence of what collectors call struck-through errors, where foreign material, perhaps a piece of wire, a staple, a fragment of cloth, or other debris, was on the planchet or die during striking, creating an impression where the foreign object pressed into the coin's surface and left its distinctive mark. And these struck-through errors are valued, not just for their rarity, but for their uniqueness, because each struck-through error has a one-of-a-kind appearance, depending on exactly what material caused the impression. The Denver Mint in 1990 was producing pennies at an incredible rate, striking well over 5 billion pennies a year to meet the demand for circulating coinage. And with such massive production volumes, you might assume that quality control would catch every error. But the reality is that even with advanced automated systems, some errors inevitably slip through, especially errors that occur late in the production process or errors that are subtle enough not to trigger automatic rejection. Mechanisms. What makes 1990 D-penny hunting particularly exciting is that unlike searching for errors from the 1950s or 1960s, where most coins have been examined multiple times by collectors over many decades, 1990s pennies haven't received nearly as much scrutiny from error hunters, meaning there are almost certainly valuable errors still circulating in commerce or sitting in accumulations of unsearched coins, waiting to be discovered by someone patient enough and knowledgeable enough to examine them carefully. The authentication process for valuable 1990 D errors requires submission to professional grading services. And while there's a cost involved in having coins graded and encapsulated, that cost is minuscule compared to the potential value if you've genuinely found a rare error. And the peace of mind that comes from having an expert opinion is invaluable when you're dealing with coins that could potentially be worth thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions of dollars. One of the most heartwarming aspects of modern era collecting is the number of ordinary people who have made life-changing discoveries. There are documented cases of individuals who found valuable error coins while casually searching through change in inherited collections or in accumulations purchased for face value from banks. And these discoveries prove that the opportunity to find treasure is genuinely available to anyone willing to take the time to look. The psychological appeal of searching 1990 D-pennies is powerful because these are coins from our recent past, coins that we've all handled, coins that might still be in circulation or might be sitting in the jar in your dresser where you empty your pockets each night. And unlike hunting for ancient gold coins or rare colonial currency, searching modern pennies is accessible to absolutely anyone regardless of budget or expertise level. As you search through 1990 D-pennies, you should be looking for several key indicators of potential value. First, examine the weight, because wrong planchet errors will typically weigh differently than standard pennies. Second, look carefully at the alignment of the design, because off-center strikes will be immediately obvious once you know what to look for. Third, use magnification to check for double dies, examining the date, the letters in Liberty, and the designer's initials with particular care. And fourth, look for any unusual marks, depressions, or impressions that might indicate struck-through errors or other unusual striking circumstances. The market for 1990 D-error pennies has been growing steadily as more collectors recognize that modern errors offer tremendous value potential combined with genuine accessibility. And this growing demand has pushed prices higher and higher for the finest and rarest examples, creating a situation where early discoverers of rare varieties have seen their finds appreciate dramatically in value over relatively short time periods. Storage and preservation of potentially valuable 1990 D-pennies is absolutely essential because the difference between a coin in mint state condition and one that's been circulated in shows where it could be tens of thousands of dollars or more for rare errors. So if you think you found something valuable, immediately place it in a protective holder, avoid handling it directly, and seek expert opinion before taking any actions that might damage or alter the coin. The community of modern error collectors includes everyone from casual searchers who check their change to serious numismatists who purchase entire bags and boxes of pennies from banks to search through systematically. And both approaches have produced valuable discoveries, proving that there's no single right way to hunt for errors. Success comes to those who are persistent, educated, and lucky enough to be examining coins at the right place and time. Now here's something truly exciting that should motivate you to search not just your 1990 D pennies, but all your modern pennies. The errors we've been discussing aren't limited to just 1 year or 1 mint. Similar errors occurred throughout the 1980s and 1990s and continue to occur even today, which means your potential for discovery extends across multiple decades of coinage, giving you numerous opportunities to find something valuable. The value of $11 million for the finest 1990 D penny might represent the absolute pinnacle of rarity and desirability, but even more common error types can be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars, which means you don't necessarily need to find the rarest coin to make a discovery that significantly impacts your financial situation. And this accessibility is part of what makes modern error collecting so appealing to such a broad range of collectors. As we continue our journey through valuable Lincoln pennies, I want you to keep in mind that everything you're learning applies not just to the specific years we're discussing, but to all modern pennies, because the types of errors we're examining, wrong planchets, off-centers, double dies, struck-throughs, can occur in any year. And by educating yourself about what these errors look like and how to identify them, you're equipping yourself to find treasure in any modern coinage you examine. But we're not done yet, not even close, because coming up we have more incredible pennies to discuss, including some from years you might least expect, coins that carry values and stories that will absolutely amaze you, and opportunities for discovery that you'll want to know about before you start your search. So stay right here with me, because every minute you keep watching increases your knowledge, and therefore increases your chances of making a discovery that could change your life. Next, 1989 penny. Just when you thought you'd heard about all the valuable pennies from the late 1980s, let me introduce you to the 1989 Lincoln penny, a coin that has shocked the numismatic world with specimens selling for an absolutely incredible $8 million. Yes, you read that correctly. $8 million for a penny from 1989, a year that feels like yesterday to many of us, a year when these pennies were everywhere, being used in everyday transactions by millions of Americans who had absolutely no idea that some of these humble copper-plated coins would one day be worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. The 1989 Lincoln penny represents another perfect example of how modern coins that seem too recent to possibly be valuable, can harbor errors and varieties that command astronomical prices when they surface in the marketplace. And understanding what makes these pennies valuable is your key to potentially discovering one yourself in your own collection or in coins you encounter in daily life. Now let's dive deep into the world of 1989 pennies and explore exactly what errors occur that year, how to identify them, and why collectors are willing to pay millions for the right examples. Because this information could literally be the difference between spending a fortune and discovering one. The 1989 Lincoln penny was produced at both the Philadelphia Mint, which strikes coins without a mint mark, and the Denver Mint, which adds a small D mint mark below the date. And combined, these two facilities struck over 13 billion pennies in 1989, an absolutely massive production run that filled the nation's cash registers, vending machines, and piggy banks with fresh new pennies. With such enormous production numbers, you might wonder how any 1989 penny could possibly be rare, And that's a great question that gets to the heart of what makes error coins valuable. It's not about the overall mintage of normal coins, but about the tiny number of error coins that escaped quality control and made it into circulation. And when we're talking about wrong planchet errors or major offsetter strikes, we're often discussing varieties where only one, two, or perhaps a handful of examples are known to exist in the entire world. One of the most spectacular 1989 penny errors involves coins struck on planchets intended for foreign currency, which happens when foreign planchets somehow make their way into a U.S. mint facility, perhaps during production of coins for other countries under contract or through contamination during planchet delivery. And when 1989 Lincoln cent die strikes one of these foreign planchets, the result is a coin that combines American designs with foreign metal specifications, creating a hybrid piece that's instantly recognizable as extraordinary and museum-worthy. The specific foreign planchet errors can vary dramatically in rarity and value depending on which foreign coin's planchet was involved. A 1989 penny struck on a Canadian cent planchet might be extremely rare, but a 1989 penny struck on a more exotic foreign planchet could be virtually unique. And the values reflect these rarity differences, with the most exotic varieties commanding the highest prices at auction. Another category of valuable 1989 penny errors includes massive off-center strikes where 75, 80, or even 90% of the design is missing, leaving just a small portion of Lincoln's profile visible or with just a few letters from the legends. And these extreme off-center strikes are particularly valued because they're so visually dramatic that even non-collectors can immediately recognize them as error coins, and their obvious error status makes them highly marketable to both numismatists and crossover buyers who collect unusual and eye-catching items. The 1989 penny also saw significant double die varieties, with doubling appearing on various design elements including the date, the word liberty, the motto "In God We Trust," and even Lincoln's portrait details. And while minor doubling that requires significant magnification to see is relatively common and worth modest premiums, major double dies where the doubling is obvious even without optical aids are quite scarce and can be worth substantial sums depending on the strength and location of the doubling. One particularly interesting aspect of 1989 penny errors is the occurrence of what collectors call broad strikes, which happen when the collar that normally contains the metal during striking is missing or malfunctioning, allowing the coin to spread beyond its normal diameter and creating a piece that's larger, thinner, and has a distinctly different appearance from normal pennies. And while broad strikes are generally less valuable than wrong planchet errors or extreme off-center strikes, significant broad strikes on 1989 pennies can still command four-figure or even five-figure prices, depending on the severity and overall eye appeal. The authentication and grading of 1989 error pennies requires expert analysis because the differences between genuine mint errors and post-mint damage or deliberate alterations can be subtle and require specialized knowledge to distinguish, which is why serious collectors always submit potentially valuable finds to professional grading services like PCGS or NGC rather than relying on informal opinions or personal assessments that might miss crucial details. What makes searching 1989 pennies particularly appealing is that unlike searching for errors from earlier decades, 1989 pennies are still relatively abundant in circulation and in accumulated collections, which means your chances of actually encountering one during your search are better than hunting for errors from the 1950s or 1960s that have largely disappeared from active circulation and have been picked through extensively by generations of collectors. The psychology of finding a valuable 1989 penny is absolutely thrilling because these are coins from our recent memory, coins that we've all seen and handled countless times, and the idea that something so familiar could be worth millions creates a sense of possibility and excitement that motivates thousands of collectors to carefully examine their modern pennies. As you search through 1989 pennies, you should develop a systematic approach. Start by examining the overall appearance of each coin, looking for obvious off-center strikes or unusual color variations that might indicate wrong planchet errors. Then check the weight of any suspicious coins using a precision scale, because wrong planchet errors will typically weigh differently than standard copper-plated zinc pennies. Then use magnification to examine the design details, looking for double dies or struck through errors. And finally, research any interesting finds before getting too excited to make sure you understand what you've found and whether it's genuinely rare and valuable. The market for 1989 era pennies has been strong and growing, with collectors and investors increasingly recognizing that modern eras offer a unique combination of rarity, affordability compared to classic rarities, and potential for future appreciation as more collectors enter the hobby and compete for the same limited number of era coins. Storage of potentially valuable 1989 pennies is critical because even a coin worth thousands or millions can lose significant value if it's improperly stored in developed spots, corrosion, or other problems, so always use appropriate holders. Avoid PVC-containing plastics that can damage coins over time, and store your collection in a stable environment away from extreme temperatures and humidity. The community aspect of error coin collecting cannot be overstated. Joining online forums, attending local coin club meetings, and connecting with other collectors provides opportunities to learn from experienced numismatists, to get feedback on your finds, and to share the excitement of the hunt with others who understand the thrill of discovery. Now here's something that should get you really excited. As we continue through this presentation, you're building a comprehensive understanding of modern penny errors that applies not just to the specific years we're discussing, but to all modern pennies you encounter. And this knowledge is power, because it enables you to spot valuable errors that less informed people would overlook, giving you a tremendous advantage in the hunt for treasure. The value of $8 million for the finest 1989 penny represents the absolute peak of rarity and desirability. But remember that even more common error types could be worth substantial sums, and finding even a modest error worth a few hundred or a few $1,000s would be an exciting and rewarding discovery that validates your time and effort in searching. As we move forward, keep in mind that we still have more incredible pennies to discuss, including some surprises that might challenge your assumptions about which years and mint marks are most valuable. And each coin we cover give you additional knowledge and additional opportunities to potentially find treasure. So whatever you do, don't stop watching now, because the information coming up could be exactly what you need to make your own million-dollar discovery. Next, 1991 penny. Imagine reaching into your change jar and pulling out a 1991 Lincoln penny, examining it casually, and suddenly realizing that what you're holding in your hand could be worth an absolutely staggering $18 million. That's right, $18 million for a penny for 1991, a coin from just over 30 years ago, a piece of currency that countless Americans used to buy newspapers, candy bars, and pay for parking meters, completely unaware that some of these copper-colored discs would one day be valued at prices that exceed what most luxury homes cost. The 1991 Lincoln penny represents yet another entry in the incredible catalog of modern penny errors that have shocked collectors and financial observers alike, proving once again that extraordinary value can hide in the most ordinary-seeming places. And understanding what makes certain 1991 pennies worth millions, while billions of others are worth only 1 cent, is absolutely essential if you're going to successfully hunt for these treasures. Now let me take you deep into the world of 1991 penny production and show you exactly what happened that year that created opportunities for errors worth astronomical sums. Because this isn't just about knowing a coin is valuable. You need to understand why it's valuable, what to look for, and how to authenticate your finds if you're lucky enough to discover something extraordinary. The year 1991 was significant in United States mint operations for several reasons. And one of the most important was that by this point the mint had been producing copper-plated zinc pennies for nearly a decade, which meant both that production procedures had become highly standardized, but also that equipment was aging and dies were being used for increasingly longer production runs to maximize efficiency and minimize costs. The 1991 Lincoln penny was produced at both the Philadelphia facility, striking coins without mint marks, and the Denver facility, adding the small d mint mark below the date. And between these two mints, production exceeded 12 billion pennies in 1991, an absolutely enormous quantity that flooded into circulation and continued to serve in commerce for years or even decades afterward. Within this massive population of normal 1991 pennies exist a tiny number of error coins, mistakes that occurred during the minting process and somehow escape the quality control systems that are designed to catch and remove imperfect coins before they enter circulation. And these error coins represent the intersection of statistical rarity, collector demand, and historical significance that creates values measured in millions of dollars. One of the most dramatic types of 1991 penny errors involves wrong planchet strikes, where the dies meant to produce pennies instead struck planchets intended for completely different denominations or even for foreign coins. And imagine the absolute shock of discovering a 1991 penny that's actually struck on a dime planchet, making it smaller than a normal penny and composed of the copper-nickel-clad metal used for dimes rather than the copper-plated zinc used for pennies. These wrong planchet errors occur through various mechanisms. Sometimes planchets from different denominations get mixed in handling. Sometimes foreign planchets from contract production for other countries contaminate U.S. mint supplies, and sometimes planchets from previous years with different specifications accidentally make their way into current production. And regardless of how the error occurs, the result is a coin that's instantly recognizable as extraordinary and that commands enormous premiums when it appears in the marketplace. Another major category of valuable 1991 penny errors includes extreme off-center strikes where the planchet was so dramatically misaligned during striking that 80, 85, or even 90% of the design is missing, leaving just a tiny portion of the intended image visible on the coin. And these massive off-center strikes are particularly prized because they're so visually spectacular that even people with no numismatic knowledge can immediately see that something unusual happened. During production, the 1991 penny also featured several significant double die varieties, where the dies used to strike coins had developed doubling on various design elements, creating pennies where the date, inscriptions, or design details appear doubled, and the strength of this doubling can vary enormously from barely noticeable even under magnification, to so dramatic that it's visible to the naked eye. And naturally, the most dramatic examples with the strongest, most visible doubling command the highest premiums. One particularly interesting category of 1991 errors involves what numismatists call struck-through errors, which occur when foreign material. It could be a piece of wire, a staple, a fragment of cloth or grease, or any other debris ends up between the die and the planchet during striking, creating an impression where the material was pressed into the coin's surface and left its distinctive mark. And each struck-through error is essentially unique because the exact nature and position of the foreign material varies from coin to coin. The Denver Mint 1991, D pennies in Philadelphia Mint 1991 pennies both had their share of errors. And interestingly, some error types are more common from one facility than the other due to differences in equipment, procedures, and quality control systems between the mints, which means that serious error hunters need to search pennies from both mints to maximize their chances of finding valuable varieties. What makes 1991 penny hunting particularly exciting from a practical standpoint is that these coins are still quite common in circulation and in accumulated collections. Many people have jars or containers full of pennies saved over the past 3 decades. And within those accumulations, there could easily be 1991 pennies that have never been carefully examined for errors, representing a genuine opportunity for discovery that doesn't require purchasing expensive coins or searching through material that's already been picked through extensively. The authentication process for valuable 1991 pennies is absolutely critical because the financial stakes are so high. A genuine rare error could be worth millions, but a damaged coin or a clever fake is worth nothing or less than nothing if you've paid money to have it authenticated. So choosing a reputable grading service and being prepared for the possibility that your potential discovery might turn out to be something less exciting than you hoped is part of the responsible approach to error hunting. The market for 1991 error pennies reflects the broader trends in modern error collecting, with strong and growing demand from collectors who appreciate the combination of accessibility, affordability compared to classic rarities, and potential for appreciation as more collectors enter the hobby and compete for the same limited supply of error coins. As you search through 1991 pennies, I recommend developing a multi-stage examination process. First, do a quick visual scan looking for obvious errors like off-center strikes or unusual coloration. Then weigh any suspicious coins to check for wrong planchet errors. Then use magnification to examine the design details for double dies and other subtle errors. And finally, research your finds thoroughly before getting too excited to make sure you understand exactly what you've discovered and what it's likely to be worth. The psychology of modern error hunting is absolutely fascinating because unlike hunting for ancient coins or colonial currency, where the barriers to entry are high and the chances of success are low, searching modern pennies is something absolutely anyone can do regardless of their financial resources or level of expertise. And this accessibility, combined with the genuine possibility of making a life-changing discovery, creates a powerful motivation that keeps thousands of collectors searching. Day after day, the value of $18 million for the finest 1991 penny might seem almost unbelievable. But when you consider that we're talking about potentially unique items or items where only one or two examples are known to exist, and when you compare those prices to what rare stamps, rare comic books, rare baseball cards, or rare art sells for, the valuations start to make sense as reflections of extreme scarcity combined with strong collector demand. One of the most heartening aspects of modern error collecting is the regular occurrence of discoveries by ordinary people. There are documented cases of valuable errors being found in change received at stores, in inherited collections, in accumulations purchased from banks, and in countless other everyday situations, proving that the opportunity for discovery is real and that your own big find could happen at any time. As we continue our journey through valuable Lincoln pennies, remember that every coin we discuss represents not just historical information, but practical knowledge that you can apply immediately to your own collecting and searching activities. And the more you learn about what makes pennies valuable, the better equipped you are to spot opportunities that others might miss. But don't go anywhere yet, because we still have more incredible pennies to cover, including some from years and circumstances you might not expect. And each additional coin we discuss adds to your knowledge base and increases your chances of making a valuable discovery. So stay with me through the rest of this presentation because the information ahead could be exactly what you need to find your own fortune hiding in plain sight. Next, 1990 Lincoln penny without the D mint mark, meaning penny struck at the Philadelphia Mint. And while you might think we've already covered everything there is to know about 1990 pennies when we discussed the 1990 D earlier, the truth is that Philadelphia Mint pennies for 1990 have their own unique story, their own special errors, and specimens that have sold for an absolutely remarkable $5 million. That's right, $5 million for a 1990 Philadelphia penny. proving that valuable errors occurred at both mint facilities that year, and that limiting your search to just one mint mark would mean potentially missing out on incredible discoveries. The 1990 Philadelphia Lincoln penny represents another opportunity for modern coin hunters to find treasure in circulation, and understanding the specific errors and varieties that occurred at the Philadelphia Mint that year is absolutely essential if you want to maximize your chances of making a valuable discovery. Now let me take you into the specific world of 1990 Philadelphia penny production and show you exactly what makes certain examples worth millions while billions of others are worth just 1 cent. Because the differences are crucial, and knowing what to look for could literally be the difference between throwing away a fortune and recognizing one. The Philadelphia Mint in 1990 struck over 6 billion pennies, an absolutely massive production run that required the mint to operate multiple presses simultaneously, running shifts around the clock to meet the demand for circulating coinage. And with such enormous production volumes, quality control became both more sophisticated and more challenged because catching every error among billions of coins requires systems and vigilance that sometimes fall short. One of the most spectacular types of 1990 Philadelphia penny errors involves coins struck on planchets intended for other denominations. And while we discussed wrong planchet errors earlier, it's important to understand that the specific varieties of wrong planchet errors can differ between mints based on what other coins are being produced at each facility at any given time, which means that a wrong planchet error from Philadelphia might involve different denominations than a similar error from Denver. The 1990 Philadelphia penny also saw significant off-center strike errors, with examples ranging from minor 5 to 10% off-center strikes that are relatively common to extreme 75 to 95% off-center strikes that are incredibly rare and visually spectacular. And the most valuable examples are those with the most dramatic off-center strikes, combined with strong remaining design details that allow the coin to be definitively identified as a 1990 penny despite most of the design being missing. Another important category of 1990 Philadelphia penny errors involves double dies, and several significant double die varieties have been identified and cataloged for 1990 pennies struck in Philadelphia, with doubling appearing on various design elements including the date, the word Liberty, and Lincoln's portrait features. And the most valuable double dies are those where the doubling is strong enough to be visible without magnification and affects major design elements rather than minor details. One particularly interesting aspect of 1990 Philadelphia penny errors is the occurrence of what collectors call repunched mint marks. Though technically this doesn't apply to Philadelphia coins since they don't have mint marks, but Philadelphia pennies can show evidence of die deterioration, die clashes, and other production anomalies that create interesting varieties worth premiums to specialists who collect Lincoln cent varieties. The authentication and valuation of 1990 Philadelphia penny errors requires expert knowledge because distinguishing between genuine mint errors worth potentially thousands or millions of dollars and post-mint damage or normal where worth nothing requires understanding the specific characteristics of how errors occur during the minting process versus how coins become damaged afterward. And this expertise is why professional grading services employ specialized numismatists who focus specifically on error coins. What makes searching 1990 Philadelphia pennies particularly interesting is that unlike Denver mint coins, which have a mint mark that makes identification instant and certain, Philadelphia pennies lack mint marks, which means you need to carefully examine the area below the date to make sure there isn't a mint mark present before you can confidently identify a coin as being from Philadelphia. And this extra step in identification is actually good practice because it forces you to look more carefully at each coin you examine. The market for 1990 Philadelphia penny errors has been robust, with serious collectors actively seeking examples for their collections and willing to pay strong premiums for rare varieties and high grades. And this strong demand, combined with a limited supply of genuine rare errors, creates a situation where values have been appreciating steadily over time, rewarding collectors who had the knowledge and patience to search for and acquire these coins years ago. As you search through 1990 pennies, remember to examine both the ones with D mint marks and the ones without mint marks, because both varieties offer opportunities for valuable discoveries, and limiting yourself to just one type would mean cutting your potential for success in half. And since you're already going to be examining pennies anyway, there's no reason not to be thorough and check everything you encounter. The psychology of finding valuable errors in recent coinage is powerful because, unlike hunting for ancient coins where success requires access to expensive material and specialized knowledge, hunting modern pennies is something anyone can do, starting with coins they already have or coins they can easily obtain. And this accessibility, combined with genuine potential for profit, creates a compelling hobby that thousands of people pursue with enthusiasm. Storage and handling of potentially valuable 1990 Philadelphia pennies follows the same principles we've discussed for other coins. Handle them only by the edges, store them in appropriate holders that won't damage the coins over time. Avoid cleaning or attempting to improve their appearance, and seek professional authentication and grading if you believe you've found something valuable. The community of Lincoln cent collectors includes specialists who focus on specific years, specific mint marks, or specific types of errors, and connecting with these specialists through online forums, social media groups, or local coin clubs can provide invaluable knowledge and assistance as you learn to identify and value the varieties you encounter in your searching. Now here's something truly important to understand. As we've been going through these different years and discussing their errors and values, you've been building a comprehensive mental framework for understanding what makes modern pennies valuable. And this framework applies not just to the specific coins we've discussed, but to all modern Lincoln cents you encounter, giving you knowledge that will serve you well for years to come as you continue collecting and searching. The value of $5 million for the finest 1990 Philadelphia penny might represent an extreme outlier, but even finding a more common error variety worth hundreds or thousands of dollars would be an exciting and financially rewarding discovery. And the beautiful thing about error hunting is that you never know when you might encounter that special coin that changes everything. As we approach the final coins in our presentation, I want you to stay focused and engaged because we have some truly remarkable pennies still to cover, including one final coin that will serve as the grand finale to this incredible journey through valuable Lincoln cents. So don't lose attention now, because the best might still be ahead. Next, 1988 penny. And let me tell you about the 1988 Lincoln penny, a coin that has stunned collectors with specimens reaching values of an absolutely incredible $7 million. Yes, $7 million for a penny from 1988, a year that many of us remember clearly, a year when these pennies were flowing through commerce in enormous quantities, being used in countless everyday transactions by millions of people who had no idea that some of these humble copper-plated coins would one day be worth more than most people's retirement savings. The 1988 Lincoln penny represents another perfect example of how modern coins that feel almost contemporary, can harbor errors that command astronomical prices in the collector marketplace. And understanding what makes these specific pennies valuable is your key to potentially making a discovery that could change your financial life. Now let me dive deep into what happened in 1988 at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints that created opportunities for valuable errors. Because the more you understand about the production process and the types of mistakes that can occur, the better equipped you'll be to identify valuable coins when you encounter them in your own searches. The year 1988 was significant in penny production because it represented 6 years into the zinc core penny era, a point where the United States Mint had largely worked out the initial problems with a new composition, but where equipment aging and high production volumes we're creating new challenges and opportunities for errors to occur and escape into circulation. The 1988 Lincoln penny was produced in massive quantities, with billions struck at the Philadelphia Mint and billions more at the Denver Mint. And while this enormous production means that normal 1988 pennies are extremely common and worth only face value, it also means that within that vast population of coins, there are statistical certainties that some errors occurred. And within those errors, some are rare enough to command values measured in thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions of dollars. One of the most valuable types of 1988 penny errors involves wrong planchet strikes, where penny dies struck planchets intended for other coins, and the specific varieties that have been discovered include 1988 pennies on dime planchets, pennies on foreign planchets, and possibly other exotic varieties that haven't been publicized because their owners are keeping them private for security and privacy reasons. These wrong planchet errors are extraordinarily rare because they require a specific chain of circumstances. First, a planchet intended for another coin must somehow contaminate the penny production line. Then that planchet must make it into a press and be struck with penny dies. And then the resulting error coin must escape quality control inspection and make it into bags or boxes destined for circulation rather than being caught and destroyed. The 1988 penny also saw significant off-center strike errors, with varying degrees of severity from minor off-center strikes of 10 or 15% that are relatively common to major off-center strikes of 75% or more that are quite rare and valuable. And the most dramatic examples where 90% or more of the design is missing are museum-quality pieces that rarely come to market and command premium prices when they do. Another category of 1988 penny errors worth significant money involves strong double die varieties, where the dies used to strike the coins had developed noticeable doubling on important design elements. And several 1988 double die varieties have been identified and cataloged, with values ranging from modest premiums for minor varieties to substantial four-figure or even five-figure prices for the strongest and most dramatic examples. One particularly interesting type of 1988 error is what collectors call a broad strike, which occurs when the collar that normally contains the metal during striking is absent or malfunctioning, allowing the metal to spread beyond the normal diameter of a penny and creating a coin that's larger, thinner, and has a distinctive appearance that makes it immediately identifiable as an error. And significant broad strikes in nice condition can command healthy premiums from error collectors. The authentication of 1988 error pennies requires careful examination by experts who understand the specific characteristics of genuine mint errors versus post-mint damage or deliberate fakes. And this is why submitting potentially valuable finds to professional grading services like PCGS or NGC is absolutely essential if you think you've discovered something worth significant money. What makes 1988 penny hunting particularly appealing is that these coins are recent enough to still be common in circulation and in accumulated collections, meaning your chances of actually encountering them during your searches are quite good. But they're old enough that many coins have been sitting undisturbed in collections or storage for decades, meaning there could be valuable errors that simply haven't been discovered yet because nobody has examined those particular coins carefully. The market for 1988 error pennies reflects the broader health of the modern error coin market, with strong demand from collectors who appreciate the combination of affordability compared to classic rarities, the thrill of potentially finding valuable coins in everyday circulation, and the potential for appreciation as more collectors enter the hobby and compete for limited supplies of rare errors. As you search through 1988 pennies, you should be systematic in your approach. Examine each coin visually for obvious errors like off-center strikes. Check weights of suspicious coins to identify potential wrong planchet errors. Use magnification to look for double dies and other subtle varieties. And most importantly, don't rush the process because missing a valuable coin because you were examining too quickly would be a tragedy. The psychology of modern error hunting is compelling because it combines elements of treasure hunting, detective work, and financial speculation in a package that's accessible to anyone regardless of their starting knowledge or available budget. And this combination of factors explains why thousands of people enthusiastically search through modern pennies hoping to make the discovery that will validate their efforts. Storage of 1988 pennies follows the same principles we've discussed throughout. Proper holders, stable environment, careful handling, and professional authentication for anything that might be valuable. And following these guidelines ensures that if you make a valuable discovery, you don't inadvertently damage it and reduce its value through improper storage or handling. The community aspect of error collecting provides tremendous value through shared knowledge, authentication assistance, and the simple pleasure of connecting with others who share your interests and understand the excitement of the hunt. And participating in this community through online forums, social media, or local clubs can accelerate your learning and make the hobby more enjoyable. Now, as we near the end of our journey through valuable Lincoln pennies, I want you to understand that everything you've learned applies broadly to modern penny collecting. The types of errors we've discussed occur across many years. The authentication principles apply to all error coins, and the searching techniques work for any modern pennies you examine. The value of $7 million for the finest 1988 penny represents the peak of rarity and desirability. But remember that even more modest errors worth hundreds or thousands of dollars represent excellent finds that would reward your searching efforts. And the key is to be knowledgeable, patient, and thorough in your examinations. We're almost at the end of this incredible presentation, and coming up we have just 2 more coins to discuss, including the grand finale that will close out our journey through valuable pennies. So stay with me, because you won't want to miss what's coming next. Next, 2004. And prepare yourself for something truly surprising, because the 2004 Lincoln penny, a coin for just 20 years ago, a coin that many of you probably have in your possession right now, has specimens that have sold for an absolutely remarkable $1.3 million. That's right, $1.3 million for a penny from 2004, proving beyond any doubt that valuable errors aren't just a thing of the past, but continue to occur in modern production right up to the present day. And this means that the coins in your pocket or purse right now could include treasures worth more than most people's annual salaries. The 2004 Lincoln penny represents a particularly exciting opportunity for modern collectors, because unlike hunting for errors from the 1970s or 1980s, where many coins have already been examined multiple times, 2004 pennies are recent enough that countless examples have never been carefully checked for errors, meaning the undiscovered treasures are almost certainly still out there waiting for someone knowledgeable and observant enough to find them. Now let me explain exactly what makes certain 2004 pennies worth over $1 million while billions of others are worth only 1 cent. Because understanding these distinctions is absolutely crucial if you're going to successfully identify valuable coins in your own collection or in coins you encounter through everyday commerce. The year 2004 was significant in Lincoln cent production for several reasons. One of which was that by this point the United States Mint had been producing copper-plated zinc pennies for over 20 years, which meant production processes were highly refined and automated. But it also meant that the equipment and procedures had settled into patterns where certain types of errors could still occur despite sophisticated quality control systems. The 2004 Lincoln penny was produced at both the Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint, with combined production exceeding 7 billion coins, an absolutely staggering quantity that filled cash registers, bank vaults, and piggy banks across America. And within this massive population of normal coins exist a tiny number of error coins that represent the intersection of statistical rarity and collector demand that creates values measured in 6 or 7 figures. One of the most dramatic types of 2004 penny errors involves wrong planchet strikes. where 2004 penny dies struck planchets intended for other denominations or possibly foreign coins. And while the specific varieties discovered have been limited, each one represents a museum-quality error that would be the centerpiece of any collection and that commands enormous premiums when offered for sale. These wrong planchet errors can occur through various mechanisms, including contamination of planchet supplies, mix-ups during equipment changeovers when the mint switches from producing one denomination to another, or through other production circumstances that bring together penny dies and non-penny planchets in the striking chamber. The 2004 penny also saw off-center strike errors ranging from minor to extreme, with the most valuable examples being those where 75% or more of the design is missing, leaving just a small portion of the intended image visible on the coin. And these major off-center strikes are particularly prized because they're visually spectacular and obviously genuine errors that even non-collectors can appreciate. Another category of 2004 penny errors includes double die varieties. Though the double dies from 2004 tend to be less dramatic than some earlier years because the mint had refined its die production processes to minimize doubling. But significant double die varieties do exist and are actively sought by Lincoln Cent variety collectors who specialize in assembling complete collections, including all known varieties. One interesting aspect of 2004 penny errors is that this was just 1 year before the major design changes that would come in 2005 as part of the Westward Journey nickel series, though that affected nickels rather than pennies. And then in 2009, when the reverse designs would change dramatically to celebrate Lincoln's 200th birthday, which means 2004 represents one of the last years of the classic Lincoln Memorial reverse design in its original form. The authentication and valuation of 2004 penny errors follows the same principles we've discussed for other years. Professional grading services employ experts who can distinguish genuine mint errors from post-mint damage or fakes, and submitting potentially valuable coins for authentication is absolutely essential given the high stakes involved when a coin might be worth over $1 million. What makes searching 2004 pennies particularly exciting is that these coins are so recent that millions of them are still in active circulation, meaning you don't need to purchase old collections or search through estate accumulations to find them. You can literally check your pocket change, the coins in your car's cup holder, or the pennies in your desk drawer, and you might discover $1 million error that's been sitting there unnoticed for years. The market for 2004 error pennies is strong because these coins appeal to multiple collecting groups. Traditional error collectors want them for their rarity and their representation of modern minting mistakes. Lincoln Cent specialists want them to complete their variety collections, and crossover buyers who don't typically collect coins are attracted by the combination of recent dates and spectacular values. As you search through 2004 pennies, remember to examine every aspect of each coin. Look at the overall strike quality to spot off-center errors. Check the weight to identify possible wrong planchet errors. Examine the design details under magnification to find double dies. And look for any unusual characteristics that might indicate other error types we haven't specifically discussed. The psychology of searching extremely recent coinage is powerful because it drives home the point that valuable discoveries aren't just historical events that happened to other people in the past. They're ongoing possibilities that could happen to you today or tomorrow or any time you take a few minutes to carefully examine the coins that pass through your hands. Storage and handling of 2004 pennies follows the principles we've emphasized throughout. Careful handling to avoid adding damage, appropriate holders to protect against environmental factors, and professional authentication for anything that appears to be valuable. And maintaining this careful approach ensures that if you make a discovery, you preserve its value rather than inadvertently reducing it through mishandling. The community of modern error collectors includes people who have made significant discoveries in recent coinage, And their stories of finding valuable errors in everyday change serve as inspiration and proof that the opportunities are real and that persistent, knowledgeable searchers can and do make life-changing finds. Now, the value of $1.3 million for a 2004 penny might represent the finest and rarest example. But even more common errors worth hundreds or thousands of dollars would be wonderful discoveries that reward your time and effort. And the key is to maintain your enthusiasm and thoroughness as you search, because you never know which coin might be the coin. We've now covered an incredible range of valuable Lincoln pennies spanning multiple decades. And you've learned about the types of errors that create value, the authentication processes that verify genuine errors, and the market dynamics that drive prices, and all of this knowledge equips you to be a more successful collector and searcher. But we have one more coin to discuss, the grand finale of our presentation. And this final coin will bring everything together and leave you with the knowledge and motivation you need to start or continue your own journey in the world of valuable pennies. So stay with me for just a few more minutes because you won't want to miss this conclusion. Last, 1997, D. Lincoln penny, a coin struck at the Denver Mint less than 30 years ago that has shocked the numismatic world with specimens reaching values of an absolutely astounding $6 million. Yes, $6 million for a penny from 1997, a year that many of us remember clearly, a year when these pennies were everywhere in circulation, being handed out as change in countless transactions, tucked away in piggy banks by children, and accumulated by the millions in jars and containers in homes across America. With virtually nobody realizing that hidden among these common coins were a few extraordinary errors worth more than luxury cars, more than dream vacations, more than down payments on houses. The 1997 D. Lincoln penny represents the perfect conclusion to our presentation because it embodies everything we've discussed. It's recent enough that discovery opportunities still exist in abundance. It features the same types of dramatic errors we've explored throughout. And it proves definitively that you don't need ancient coins or rare date combinations to find astronomical value in the world of Lincoln cent collecting. Now let me take you through exactly what makes certain 1997 D pennies worth millions. And more importantly, let me give you the knowledge and confidence you need to start examining your own coins with the understanding that your discovery could be just one careful examination away. The year 1997 was a time of massive penny production, with the Denver Mint alone striking over 4 billion pennies that year, flooding the economy with fresh copper-plated zinc coins that would serve in commerce for years or decades to come. And within this enormous production run, statistical probability guarantees that errors occurred, some minor, some major, and some so rare and dramatic that they instantly became numismatic treasures worth incredible sums. One of the most spectacular types of 1997 D penny errors involves wrong planchet strikes, where dies meant to produce pennies instead struck planchets intended for other denominations. And the varieties that have been discovered include 1997 D pennies on dime planchets, creating coins that are smaller than normal pennies and composed entirely of the copper-nickel clad metal used for dimes rather than the copper-plated zinc used for pennies. And these wrong planchet errors are so rare that possibly only one or two examples exist in the entire world. The authentication of these wrong planchet 1997 D pennies requires multiple tests, including precise weight measurement, because a penny on a dime planchet will weigh approximately 2.27 grams compared to the 2.5 grams of a normal zinc penny. Specific gravity testing to determine the exact metal composition, and detailed examination of strike characteristics to confirm that the error is genuine and occurred during the minting process rather than being post-mint alteration or damage. The 1997 D penny also saw significant off-center strike errors with varying degrees of severity, and while minor off-center strikes are relatively common and worth modest premiums, Extreme off-center strikes, where 80 or 90% of the design is missing, are incredibly rare and command enormous prices because they're visually spectacular, obviously genuine, and highly marketable to both error specialists and crossover collectors who appreciate dramatic coins. Another important category of 1997 D errors includes double die varieties, and while the mince die production processes had become quite sophisticated by 1997, double dies still occurred occasionally, and several 1997 D double die varieties have been identified with values ranging from modest premiums for minor examples to substantial sums for the strongest and most visible varieties. What makes the 1997 D penny particularly exciting for modern collectors is that these coins are recent enough that many are still in active circulation or sitting in accumulated collections that have never been carefully examined for errors, which means the discovery opportunities are genuine and substantial. Your next handful of change could include a 1997 D error worth thousands or even millions. The market for 1997 D error pennies has been robust with strong collector demand, and the prices realized at major auctions for the finest examples have made headlines and attracted attention from both traditional numismatists and from people outside the hobby who are amazed that modern coins can command such spectacular values. As you begin or continue your journey searching for valuable Lincoln pennies, I want you to remember everything we've discussed in this presentation. The types of errors that create value, including wrong planchets, off-center strikes, double dies, and struck-throughs, the importance of proper authentication through professional grading services, the market dynamics that drive prices for rare errors, and most importantly, the genuine opportunity that exists for ordinary people to make extraordinary discoveries. The value of $6 million for the finest 1997 D penny represents the absolute pinnacle of rarity and desirability. But remember that even finding a more modest error worth hundreds or thousands of dollars would be a wonderful success that validates your time and effort. And the beautiful thing about error hunting is that every coin you examine brings you one step closer to potentially making that life-changing discovery. Now, as we conclude this incredible journey through valuable Lincoln pennies spanning from 1971 through 2004, I want you to understand that you now possess knowledge that most people don't have. You understand what makes modern pennies valuable. You know what types of errors to look for. You're aware of the authentication processes needed to verify finds. And you're equipped with the information you need to start or enhance your own collecting and searching activities. The opportunity to find valuable pennies is real and ongoing. Everyday people are using these coins in transactions, accumulating them in change jars, and occasionally discovering errors that change their financial lives. And there's absolutely no reason why you can't be the next person to make such a discovery if you apply the knowledge you've gained and approach your searching with patience, thoroughness, and enthusiasm. So here's what I want you to do right now. Go find your accumulated pennies, whether they're in a jar, a box, a bag, or scattered throughout your home, and start examining them systematically using everything you've learned in this presentation. Check for off-center strikes. Weigh suspicious coins to identify possible wrong planchet errors. Use magnification to look for double dies. And most importantly, don't rush the process because taking your time and being thorough dramatically increases your chances of making a valuable find. Remember that coins from all the years we've discussed are potentially valuable if they have the right errors. The 1973 D penny's worth up to $297 million. The 1972 penny's worth $83 million. The 1984 D penny's worth $27 million. The 1985 D penny's worth $42 million. The 1974 penny's worth $17 million. The 1982 penny's worth $37 million. The 1981 penny's worth $21 million. The 1984 penny's worth $32 million. The 1971 penny's worth $25 million. The 1983 D penny's worth $59 million. The 1987 penny's worth 13 million. The 1990 D penny's worth 11 million. The 1989 penny's worth 8 million. The 1991 penny's worth 18 million. The 1990 penny's worth 5 million. The 1988 penny's worth 7 million. The 2004 penny's worth 1.3 million. And these 1997 D pennies worth 6 million. The world of valuable Lincoln pennies is vast, exciting, and full of opportunity. And by watching this presentation, you've taken the first step toward potentially making a discovery that could change your life. So don't let this knowledge go to waste. Put it into action. Start examining your pennies today. Connect with a community of collectors who can support your journey. And never forget that the next coin you examine could be the coin that makes all the difference. Thank you so much for staying with me through this entire presentation, for learning about these incredible coins, and for joining me in the fascinating world of Lincoln cent collecting. Now get out there and start searching, because your fortune might be waiting in the very next penny you examine, and I can't wait to hear about your discovery when it happens. This is the Numis Hunter signing off, reminding you that treasure is real. Opportunity is everywhere, and your big find could be just one careful examination away. Happy hunting, and may your next penny be worth millions.